Hey, everybody. Glad you're here with us tonight. We're going to talk tonight. We're going to have a great conversation. So I'm glad that you're here. Yeah, we'll jump right into it. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. So glad to be here with you all tonight. We're having yet another great late night conversation. The way we do this is the same way we always do, where I give my opening remarks, which are then followed by the roll call, which are then followed by me answering your questions. So first, I tell you what's on my mind for tonight. Then after that, we do the roll call, where I call you all out as I see you, names and locations. We find out who's on the other side of the camera. And then after that, I answer your questions for the remainder of the night. So there you go. A bunch of books just fell off my desk, but that's okay. So if there's something you would like me to talk about in the second half of the show, all you need to do is send your question as a Rumble rant, or you can Cash App me at CalebMoppin22. But the best way, the absolute best way to send a question is to buy me a coffee. Buy me a coffee is the perfect, ideal way to send your question. It will make me very happy. Very, very happy. And you can be anonymous, and you can type as long as you want. It's long. It's the best way to send a question. So buy me a coffee. Send your questions via buy me a coffee. Now, the next thing is just announcements. The Center for Political Innovation, we are having a National Day of Action on October 4th to support peace talks with Russia and to support the prosecution of the Russiagators, to support Tulsi Gabbard and her efforts against James Comey and against John Bolton and the Russiagators. So it's going to be great. It's going to be awesome. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Join the Center for Political Innovation, cpiusa.org. It's a great organization. We got chapters around the country. Our next big thing is the October 4th International Day of Action. January 11th, we're going to have a special event at an undisclosed location in New Jersey. So mark your calendar. For the undisclosed location event. If you register, you'll be able to find out where it's at. We're having a nice reception to start out the new year of 2026. There'll be music, and there'll be a lot of great stuff, a lot of good food. It'll be great. So yeah, keep your calendars marked for that. We're going to have the registration available for that very shortly. And as I said before, the way we do these streams, first I give my opening remarks, then we do the roll call, and then I answer your question. So send a question for the second half of the show. Questions are always appreciated. The best way to send questions is via Buy Me a Coffee. You can also send Cash App, CalebMoppin22, or you can Rumble rant me. You can, send me a Rumble rant. But the best way to do it is Buy Me a Coffee. That's the best way to do it. Unfortunately, YouTube doesn't let us do super chats anymore, but that's okay. We do it this way. So there we go. Now, tonight, we're going to talk about a couple different things that are related. We're going to talk about some current events that are related. And, the first thing, I woke up this morning. I did a great interview with Jamal Thomas. Check it out. It was a great interview. I did some work, recorded some video and all of that. And then I was looking at Twitter, which is a big mistake. I almost don't want to have Twitter. I feel like I need to have Twitter because it's not called Twitter anymore. It's called X. I need to have X. I'm going to start saying it like that. X. I need to have X. but I don't want to have X because it just, it shows you things that annoy you. And it's funny because lately I tend to agree with conservatives on a lot more, even though I'm not conservative, right? I mean, it's like, I'm somebody who has been a leftist my whole adult life, but the left have lost their minds. And increasingly, I find myself agreeing with conservatives. I'm glad that James Comey is indicted. I'm glad that Russiagate is being proven to be a hoax. I'm hoping that Trump can make peace with Russia. I'm hoping that we can get, some economic development and, build a peace bridge over the Bering Sea. I'm very, very concerned about the fact that Hak Jahan Moon is in prison in South Korea. Dr. Hak Jahan, one of the most important advocates of peace with North Korea. I'm also, concerned about a number of different cases that are taking place here in the United States. And, we were heavily involved in the defense of the Uhuru 3. And, our organization, we are not left and we're not right. We're correct, right? And we're optimistic and we're pushing forward the way forward. But, lately, when it comes to a lot of things, I tend to be more sympathetic with conservatives, but that's not always the case. And it's certainly not in economics, but, in foreign policy, they tend to be more non-interventionist. But there's a lot of awful things on the right, too. The right is blind supporters of Israel and all of that. So the big thing that's going around social media today, on this morning, is that the ADL, do folks know what the ADL is? The Anti-Defamation League, which is an awful, awful Zionist organization that smears anyone critical of Israel. The ADL has listed Charlie Kirk's organization, Turning Points USA, as a hate group. And of course, you can imagine that in the Trump camp, where there tends to be a lot of support for Israel, etc., there's huge anger at the Anti-Defamation League. I think that's a great development. I hate the Anti-Defamation League. They are, they go after Israel critics. They smear people. They're ADL, it's B'nai B'rith, Anti-Defamation League, awful, awful organization. So, on the right, a lot of people are just seething with anger at the Anti-Defamation League. Good. But then I saw this tweet going around and I was just like, oh shit. Like sometimes I just get angry at anti-intellectualism. Keep in mind, I hate the ADL. I'm probably on an ADL list. I think Canary Mission is a website, set up by Zionists, and I'm listed as a anti-Israel person on the website, right? Canary Mission lists me as not good. So the ADL probably hates me. We are not defending the ADL here. And I'm actually happy that people on the right are waking up to how awful the ADL is. But this tweet was going around and this made my head hurt. All right. The Zionist Anti-Defamation League says Christian identity is extremism, hate, or terrorism. Folks, Christian identity is a political movement called British Israelism. They're not saying that all Christians are terrorists and hate groups. The Christian identity movement is a movement that was created. It was originally called British Israelism, and in America they call themselves the Christian Identity Movement. And they believe that the Jews are imposters and that white Europeans and the British in particular are the actual Jews of the Bible. It's a form of white nationalism. It is a weird historical theory of white nationalism. And I don't want to defend the ADL, but I'm seeing this being posted everywhere. And all these people who know nothing about it are like, oh my God, ADL said that that having a Christian identity, identifying as a Christian makes you a Nazi. No, they didn't. And it's like, why are you putting me in a situation where I have to defend the ADL? Just do a Google search. The Christian Identity Movement, British Israelism, Armstrongism, that's a different thing. They made this post in 2017. Oh my good, the Christian idea, it just makes my head explode. Why do I have to know stuff, right? I'm the person who actually is interested in this kind of stuff, right? I go and I look up different groups and I know about different forms of white supremacism, right? There's, esoteric Hitlerism. There's one form of white nationalism is a movement that calls itself the Christian Identity Movement, also British Israelism, also Armstrongism. That is not the same thing as saying that all Christians are Nazis. And and it's funny, I've been complaining about stuff like this from the left for a long time, right? BreadTube, this BreadTube were the worst of this on the left. BreadTube, was a political current, the YouTube, and all of their videos were calling people Nazis, reinterpreting things people said to make them bad. And the ADL is bad in a lot of ways, right? And I'm glad that the right is criticizing and breaking with the Anti-Defamation League. That's a good thing. But this post is just dishonest, right? And I saw Matt Gaetz and all kinds of people are tweeting, oh my God. Christian identity and being a Christian are not the same thing, right? Read the Wikipedia page for British Israelism, right? The Christian identity movement is a particular interpretation. It's like a weird racial theory that white Europeans and British people are the actual Jews. That's what British Israelism is. That's what Christian identity is. That's not, and I'm not here to defend the ADL, but it annoys me when people say inaccurate things. It does, right? And I actually care, I actually care about facts and information, and so I'm really annoyed seeing something going around that is not accurate. This is not accurate. And it annoys me to see dishonesty. I think it is very interesting that there is a form of white supremacist ideology that believes that, white people are the 10 lost tribes of Israel or whatever. I think that's interesting. Why are people not interested? Why did somebody was literally just going through the ADL's website and they found that and they're like, aha, screenshot, gotcha. And it's like, there's no interest in learning actual facts, and it annoys me. And the left is just as guilty, if not more guilty of this. So I'm not singling out the right. I am not singling out the right on this point, but it's an example of this kind of internet-brained hate culture, right? And it's like, yes, British Israelism, to call British Israelism a form of white supremacy is not the same as saying that every person who identifies as a Christian is a white supremacist. That's not what the ADL was saying in that case. Now, what they said about Turning Points USA, I understand that people are angry, and ADL is an awful, awful group in many, many ways. I'm listed as on the Canary Mission. I see someone posted. I'm actually listed on their page as as being anti-Israel, and the ADL cancels and goes after anyone who criticizes Israel. But that post is not referring to that. And I guess I'm repeating myself because these kind of things annoy me. They annoy me, and what annoys me is the lack of curiosity, right? The lack of curiosity. There's often a very interesting story, and people that are just playing a game of political demonization aren't interested in what the story is. And there's many examples of this that I see where it's like, I'm very interested in politics. I'm very interested in world history. I actually take this seriously. And I see people say wildly inaccurate things because it's politically expedient. Great example. Years ago, I'm still on the email list of Media Matters for America, this liberal think tank that criticizes media. And at the time, I was much more in line with them because this was the time of the early Obama administration, and they were criticizing Bush and the Iraq War. And I got an email that they sent out, and it was the top 10 lies of the right wing. And one of the things it listed was FEMA camps. And then it said, oh, Alex Jones and right-wing people are claiming that there are these FEMA camps where Americans could be placed in a time of national emergency. No camps ever existed. This is just something they made up. Well, I immediately went, no, there's something called the what is it called? The Registration Act, the McCarran Internal Security Act, right? The McCarran Internal Security Act of 1950, and it's actually a really interesting story. It's actually a very, very interesting story. In 1950, the U.S. government passed a law that enabled the U.S. Department of Justice to make a list of 2 million people that were considered subversives, and in a national emergency, put them in prison camps. And if you read the McCarran Internal Security Act of 1950, it's all about communists. And if the, Media Matters or the Southern Poverty Law Center or whoever wanted to refute this, they should pull it up and say, well, this law did exist, and it was to target communists. And they did build the camps, but, the Supreme Court overturned it. And there was even a law repealing it in 1971, the Non-Detention Act, because they were afraid Richard Nixon might use it against his political opponents. So Congress passed the Non-Detention Act and basically repealed it. But if you just say no such law ever existed, all somebody has to do is Google it. Yes, there was a law to create concentration camps to put people in a national emergency. You can't just say that, right? You can't just say that no such law ever existed. And if you want to refute Alex Jones, show that it was about communists. It wasn't against gun owners or libertarians. It was against communists. Show that it was overturned. Show that they passed the Non-Detention Act in 1971. Show that the Supreme Court said it was unconstitutional. But don't just say, oh, no such law has ever existed, because it's politically expedient. But there's a reason they did that, right? It's like this fear of having bigger conversations. This fear of having bigger conversations, this fear of knowing things, right? And that is what grinds my gears, right? The ADL is awful, but they're not awful because they listed the Christian identity movement, which is British Israelism, as a form of white nationalism, because British Israelism is that. They're awful because they smear people that criticize Israel. They're being probably very insensitive in light of the murder of Charlie Kirk, but facts exist for a reason. But somebody who's one of these over-socialized people, that's what we're going to talk about tonight, over-socialization. One of these over-socialized people doesn't want to have that conversation, right? They're not interested in what Christian identity actually is and British Israelism. And no, they don't want to have a bigger conversation. They just want to point fingers and mobilize people to point fingers. And that is a big problem in our politics. People don't take this seriously. It's just fandom. What team are you on? Are you on the red team or are you on the blue team? And if you're on the blue team, anything that you can throw at the red team is fair game. And why do any research? Why learn? And why ask big questions about why the world works? We just want to throw things at the red team and get more internet famous for throwing things at the red team. And if we're on the blue team, all we want to do, if we're on the red team, all we want to do is throw things at the blue team. And we don't care about facts and information and all of that. We just want to throw things at the other team. Well, I'm here to tell you that FEMA camps actually did exist. And there was a law called the McCarran Internal Security Act. And that Christian identity doesn't refer to all Christians. It refers to a specific form of white nationalist ideology that believes that the British people are the actual Jews. And these facts actually matter. These facts actually matter. And I am somebody who does actually take this seriously. I'm not in this to play team sports, and I'm not in this to just get more attention for myself and get more fame by loudly playing team sports. I do actually take this seriously. That's where, you have to be careful, right? You have to draw a line, right? Inside baseball, right? There's an expression, they use the phrase inside baseball. Where, my grandfather, I always tell people, I had a grandfather from Missouri. He was from Fayette, Missouri, a little town called Fayette, Missouri. And he had grown up in the Great Depression in the 1930s. He had fought in the Second World War. And baseball was something that brought him a great deal of enjoyment. He used to listen to baseball on the radio. He used to call me, as I was a teenager and I was tall and skinny, he used to call me Slats. He'd say, hey, Slats, how's it doing, Slats? And I did not know this, but he then told me this was a reference to some famous baseball player. And my grandfather was really interested in baseball. And he knew a lot of very obscure baseball terms, very obscure baseball rules. He knew about baseball players from the 1920s, from the 30s. He had big stacks of books on the history of baseball. He was a very, very, very niche guy who knew a huge amount about baseball. And if you sat my grandfather down with another very intense baseball fan, they would start talking, and pretty soon you'd have no idea what they were talking about. They'd be talking about obscure players and obscure rules and all kinds of stuff that, those of us that are not that into baseball, we don't know about, right? And that one thing I struggle to do, because I take what I do very, very seriously, is I don't want to make my writing and my streams, I don't want to make them inside baseball. I want people to be able to come on these streams, and maybe, they're not, intensely interested in the history of communism like I am, maybe, but I just want them to be able to engage, right? And how do you teach complex ideas and explain complex things, but make them accessible, right? And that's something I think that all of us who take this very seriously struggle with. People who don't take this seriously would never bother to learn. They don't care. But those of us who do take it seriously, we have to get into the nitty gritty. And getting into the nitty gritty often can be a little bit of a rabbit hole where you can lose the ability to explain it to the people. I mean, lately I've been laughing about this clip, but I like to listen to. There's a pastor from years ago, and I just enjoy his sermons. I don't agree with him. I don't follow his particular religious interpretation, but he would get very fired up about inside baseball among, fundamentalist Christians. And this clip always makes me laugh.
Said I'm fed up to my gizzard with this mid-tribulation rapture garbage.
Yeah, he's fed up to his gizzard with this mid-tribulation rapture garbage.
Said I'm fed up to my gizzard with this mid-tribulation rapture garbage.
Yeah, I mean, there you go. I mean, if someone was walking down the street and they said, how are you doing today? You'd say, I'm fed up to my gizzard with this mid-tribulation rapture garbage. Well, you'd think that person was a little like, mid-tribulation, what you talking about there? I have no idea what you're talking about, right? But he's quite fired up about it.
I said I'm fed up to my gizzard with this mid-tribulation rapture garbage.
So, I mean, you don't want to be that guy, right? You want to try to speak in an accessible way. You don't want to try to have inside baseball. But at the same time, most of society has the opposite problem in that they don't know anything and they don't want to know, right? And they just want to throw things at people. They just want to throw something, and they're not interested in learning about actual facts. And like that tweet from the conservatives going after the ADL made me very angry, honestly, because I am somebody who is interested in politics and interested in obscure politics and extremist groups and all of that. I actually know what Christian identity is. And all these people are retweeting something that is not true, that is not accurate. They're misrepresenting something. It's very, very annoying. So that's kind of the context with which I want to talk about things tonight. But we'll get back to over-socialization in a minute. So the next thing I want to talk about is Kamala Harris. Now, for those of you who are not aware, Kamala Harris, she was the vice president of the United States from 2021 to 2025. She left office in early 2025. I am somebody who has done a lot of investigation into Kamala Harris, right? During the pandemic, I wrote this book. In 2020, September of 2020, I published this book, Kamala Harris and the Future of America. I saw someone claim that COINTELPRO locked her up. Her conviction had nothing to do with COINTELPRO, and the FBI was the state police, but nobody cares. Yeah, exactly, right? It's like people say inaccurate things, and then if you say, well, that's not accurate, it's annoying. But anyway, Kamala Harris, during the election, this book was banned from Amazon. On the day that Kamala Harris became the Democratic Party nominee, this book that had been in print and for sale for 4 years. It sold a couple hundred copies, but not much. They banned it from Amazon on the day that she was the nominee. And that created a chain reaction. And this book exploded in popularity. As of now, it is my top selling book. It has sold thousands of copies. After they banned it from Amazon, I put it up on Lulu and I sold like over couple thousand copies there. I put it on Gumroad, the electronic version. People were buying it from there. Then Amazon restored it and it kept selling. This book, it it broke some records, and I'm quite proud of it. And, we used the book long before the 2020 election. We used the book in our documentary. We made a CPI film. Peter Coffin is very, very skilled at filmmaking. We made a CPI film, and we used the book as kind of the basis. And this is the clip from the film, because it's not just about Kamala Harris. It's about where Kamala Harris came from. And so this is from my the film. Peter Coffin made the film, but this is me explaining explaining the origin story of Kamala Harris.
What's bizarre is she's trying to frame herself as Miss Black Lives Matter, when in reality, Kamala Harris was the queen of mass incarceration. Kevin Cooper was hours away from receiving lethal injection. Hours away from it. His lawyers asked that DNA evidence be acquired in order to make sure he was actually guilty of the crime. And Kamala Harris's office tried to prevent DNA evidence from being acquired. They wanted Kevin Cooper to be executed, but the governor of California disagreed. They acquired DNA evidence, and the execution was stopped. The New York Times tells us that she feels really bad about it, for whatever that means. And people can also recall that while she was head of the California State Attorney General's office, over 1,000 people were locked up for smoking marijuana. She presided over jailing a lot of people. And on top of that, the drug labs in the state of California that were being used by the police were turning up false positive results. And yet, Kamala Harris's office did not tell the defense attorneys or the judges about this. They knew that the drug labs were turning over false positives, and people went to prison because her office concealed that their drug labs were turning up false positives. And another thing about Kamala Harris, I don't know if people saw, but there's a video of Kamala Harris where she's bragging about how she jailed the parents of children who were truant from school.
I would not be standing here were it not for the education I received. And I know many of us will say the same thing. And I believe a child going without an education is tantamount to a crime. So I decided I was going to start prosecuting parents for truancy. Well, this was a little controversial in San Francisco. And frankly, my staff went bananas. They were very concerned because we didn't know at the time whether I was going to have an opponent in my re-election race. But I said, look, I'm done. This is a serious issue, and I've got a little political capital, and I'm going to spend some of it.
Have you seen the clip? And she gets up there, and it's the same kind of thing. She's giggling. Yes, I had the idea that we could lock up parents who are truant from school. I wouldn't be anywhere in my life if it weren't for my education. And so not giving a child their education is a crime. And so I jailed parents, and she's giggling about it. It's just so great. And, I see so much in U.S. media. They like to trivialize incarceration. There's so many shows on Netflix and all of that where it ends towards the end where someone goes to jail, but it's part of the happy ending. It's okay. And they don't seem to realize what that means. When one member of a family, when a father or a mother goes to prison, or a brother or a sister, it hurts the entire family. And when Kamala Harris is up there giggling about, I locked up these parents because their kids weren't in school. Yeah, kids need to be in school. If kids aren't getting to school, it's a problem. But the worst thing you could do is then throw their parents in jail. That's not going to help the situation in any conceivable way. But when she's joking about it, and she's laughing about it, Kamala Harris, she says, what did she say? She said, well, I wouldn't be anywhere if it wasn't for my education. It's about her. The big line when she was calling out Joe Biden, when she was trying to contend with Joe Biden in the presidential election, what did she shout at Joe Biden? She shouted, that little girl was me!
There was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me.
And then her campaign started churning out T-shirts with the face of 10-year-old Kamala Harris on them. Do you remember this? Yes. It's almost like she wants us to vote for her because she was once a 10-year-old child. I mean, that's what it sounds like. What's particularly interesting is, you remember when Barack Obama was running for president. We knew everything about Barack Obama. We knew all about Barack Obama's pastor. We knew about Barack Obama's father from Kenya. We knew the school he went to in Indonesia. But Kamala Harris, barely anybody knows anything about Kamala Harris. Well, Kamala Harris's mother, who's now deceased, was from India, was a cancer researcher. And Kamala Harris's father, Donald Harris, was a Marxist economist and is a Marxist economist, a professor at Stanford University. He was an advisor to the government of Michael Manley in Jamaica. And he and Kamala are estranged from one another. He did not attend Kamala's inauguration as vice president. They're not on good speaking terms. But the more you look at it, it's very clear that Kamala Harris sees herself as a victim. The way Kamala Harris speaks, the world has been unfair to her. And she blames Donald Harris for that to some degree or other. We don't know why. We also, there's rumors, we don't really know what happened when she was in Quebec. We just know she never talks about the years that she spent in Quebec. But Kamala Harris thinks that she is a victim. And she wants the whole world to know that that little girl was her. And she wants vengeance. And she wants to make people pay. And she wanted to make Kevin Cooper pay. And she wanted to make those parents pay. That's what leftism is if it's stripped of economics. If it's stripped of class struggle, if it's stripped of a desire to have the people rise up and control the means of production, if it's just anger, if it's just revenge, it's just a call for destruction, a call for rebellion, that's what Kamala Harris is. Kamala Harris, she's very much a guillotine meme. That's what she is. It's the glorification of punishment, a desire for revenge, a desire for destruction. And that if you look at the history of socialism around the world, the strength of socialism wasn't the guillotines, it wasn't the firing squads, it wasn't the persecution. That's not what people remember the strength of socialism being. They just did a poll. 75% of Russians say that the Soviet Union was the best time in their history, but they're not thinking that because of executions. This was from a PBS documentary. They interviewed a woman named Tatiana Fedorova.
Stalin set a task. Build this or build that. And thanks to the fact that people trusted him and this enthusiasm of young people, it was possible. Remember, this was a country where people were illiterate, lived in virtual darkness, wore birch bark shoes. Even now, I think it's like something out of a fairy tale. How is it possible at one of the most difficult times to raise these great construction sites? It was only possible through the unity of the people and the love of the people for their idol.
And the reason Stalin remains wildly popular in Russia, it's not because he executed people, it's because he mobilized them to build that country up from nothing. This was a country... He built some of the world's largest power plants, he wiped out illiteracy, and he built a modern industrial country. He raised millions of people up out of poverty. And then they fought off the Nazi invaders, and then they rebuilt the country again, and a few years later they were the first country in outer space. And the strength of socialism was not that it punished people and that it persecuted people, but rather that it enabled people to go out and build and construct. I've said to many people, I'm not a socialist because I want to destroy America. I'm a socialist because I want to save America. And we have to save America from the horrors that are being unfolded by an irrational system where profits come before people. I want to save America. I want to build a better world. If all the apparatus they've created for destroying people, for imprisoning people, for breaking people psychologically, could be utilized to build and to construct, if popular power were put in control of the means of production and control of the state apparatus of the United States, we could build something very, very beautiful.
They want you to be mad at Russia and China instead of the looters that are sitting not very far from here off Wall Street, who are actively getting bailouts in the billions, arguably even in the trillions, for their gambling debts. That's what we're here against, and that's why we're taking a stand for freedom of speech, because they're going after the movement and anyone who stands against the imperialists, because they know we're a real threat and that's rising. They know we authentically represent the American people. They know that the American people are ready for a change and ready for an end to the wars. And that's why they're cracking down on our First Amendment. They're cracking down on our Fourth Amendment. They're cracking down on all the civil liberties we know and love.
Yeah, that is basically a summary of the book. I mean, obviously the book takes, hundreds of pages to make the points and has all kinds of facts and statistics and stuff. That's basically a summary of the book that I wrote about Kamala Harris. And, it was a big deal, when I appeared on Jimmy
Maupin is a journalist and political analyst based in New York City. He has reported extensively from the Middle East and Latin America and has made frequent media appearances on RT and Press TV. He is also the founder and director for the Center for Political Innovation, as well as the author of this book right here, which is called Kamala Harris and the Future of America, an essay in 3 parts. Welcome to the show, Kamala. Caleb.
Yeah, and I did a media tour over the book. I was on Kim Iverson, I was on Jimmy Dore, I was on InfoWars, I went on many different podcasts. It was a really big deal. So anyhow, the reason we're talking about Kamala Harris is that, she epically lost the election, just epically lost. And now she has just published a book explaining that it wasn't her fault that she lost. It was the Democratic Party's fault. It was Joe Biden's fault. It was everyone but her own fault that she lost the election. And that she thinks she's going to be the next Democrat. She thinks she's still a thing in politics. And I'm going to put on the interview. She did like an hour-long interview. I'm not going to show it all, but she did a really long interview with Rachel Maddow on MSNBC. And Rachel Maddow gave like an 8-minute introduction to the interview, which we're going to totally skip because it's just a waste of time, just reading from the book, basically. And she then, had Kamala Harris on. And what I don't understand, I really, really don't understand, is why is Kamala Harris getting so many chances? I mean, I do understand it, and I'll tell you why, but this is it. Basically, it's what I said in my book. There's a reason. But anybody else, right? They talk about you have your big break or whatever. Kamala Harris, they have tried to sell her to the American people. And in the 2020 election, she went down in flames. And Joe Biden did everything he could to avoid picking her as his running mate, and he picked her. And she was an epically horrible vice president. Her office could barely hold on to staff, right? I mean, all the reports from her office confirmed everything that I wrote in this book about her personality. She's completely toxic. And then she ran an epically horrible campaign. And she did her Oprah interview. I mean, they gave her the Oprah interview, which was just absolutely abysmal. And she lost the election after running one of the worst campaigns in history. But now she's back and they're trying to sell her to us again. Like, how many chances does she get? Right? I mean, it's just like there are people that are so desperate. There are very powerful people that are so desperate for Kamala Harris to be our next president that, she could be arrested for being a child molester. And they would say, well, is there a way we can get her a pardon and maybe get her back on the ballot next time? I mean, it's like you can't be a worse politician than Kamala Harris. This is epically, but they just keep bringing her back. So based on that, we're going to watch some of the Kamala Harris interview, but I'm going to tell you more. I've obviously got more to say and all of that. But anyway, this is Kamala Harris on MSNBC, right? This is Kamala Harris.
Joining us now for her first news interview since the election is former Vice President Kamala Harris. Madam Vice President, thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.
It's good to see you.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
It's weird to talk about you with you sitting here and me pretending you're not here.
Oh, it was awkward for me too. It's okay.
How have you been?
I am well. Yeah, all things considered,
Yeah.
I am well.
How have you been taking care of yourself since the election?
I have an incredible family. I've been spending more time with them than I had for quite some time. Cooking, and writing, and reflecting, and talking to a lot of people, making a lot of calls, receiving a lot of calls.
Now, the cooking thing was part of their effort to humanize her during the election, right? She did like cooking shows, and her husband is an AIPAC lobbyist, a member of the American Israeli Political Action Committee. so just keep that in mind. She's been cooking. She's been spending time with her family. I don't know if she's actually been cooking, but that's something that was a big theme during her campaign to show that she was like a real person, is that she loves cooking. And maybe she does. I don't know. But that was like a big thing from the campaign. And her family, when you think about Gaza being bombed and all of that, that's her husband. That's her husband. So there you go.
So I've been busy.
Let me talk to you about this capitulation thing.
Yep.
This really landed with me. I feel like we're all in the middle of it, but you articulating it in the way that you do, you've become the patron saint of I told you so. In terms.
No, she has not. No, she has not. She has not become the patron saint of anything. Everyone's trying to forget about her because her campaign was absolutely abysmal. No. Cooking greens in the bathtub. Oh boy. But anyway, I'm going to interrupt every 2 seconds if I keep doing this, but no, she's not been, no one's thinking about her. No one's saying, I told you, like, no one is, everyone's trying to forget her. Like,
understanding the sort of warnings and predictions that you made about what Trump would be like. But you say, I predicted all of that. I warned of it. What I didn't predict was the capitulation. The billionaires lining up to grovel, the big media companies, universities.
Here we go.
So many major law firms, I will note, including your husband's.
Yeah, and he spoke out about it.
He's been very vocal in criticizing it. He said they've all been bending to blackmail and outrageous demands.
Yeah.
Why did you not predict the capitulation? And what do you make of the effort to try to put some steel in the spine of those institutions?
So, as you know, I am a lifelong public servant. And but I've worked closely with the private sector over many years. And I always believed that if push came to shove, those titans of industry.
This is great.
Would be guardrails for our democracy, for the importance of sustaining democratic institutions. And one.
So this is memorizable. This is word salad she's memorized, but let her get to the point that she's trying to make, right? She's trying to speak like a law professor and she memorized some word salad, but the point that she's actually trying to make very badly here is a really scary one.
One by one. They have been silent. They have been, yes, I use the word feckless. It's not like they're going to lose their yacht or their house in the Hamptons. And here's the thing. Democracy sustains capitalism. Capitalism thrives in a democracy. And right now we are dealing with, as I called him at my speech on the ellipse, a tyrant. We used to compare the strength of our democracy to communist dictators. That's what we're dealing with right now in Donald Trump. And these titans of industry are not speaking up. And perhaps it is because his threats and the way he has used the weight of the federal government to take out vengeance on his critics is something that they fear, and I get that. I understand why they do. We've seen the demonstration of it. Perhaps it is because they want to please him and nominate him for a Nobel Prize. Perhaps it's because they want a merger approved or they want to avoid an investigation. But at some point, they've got to stand up for the sake of the people who rely on all of these institutions to have integrity and to, at some point, be the guardrails against a tyrant who is using the federal government to execute his whim and fancy because of a fragile ego.
She's calling for big business to overthrow the president. That's what she said, right? Trump is forcing big corporations to do what he wants. No, the rich people are supposed to run the government, not the other way around. Duh. I mean, the corporations are obeying Trump. They can't be doing that. Trump is supposed to obey the corporations. Come on, that's how this works. The corporations protect our democracy from guardrails, right? They're guardrails of democracy. The big corporations and the big lobbyists and the big monopolies and Wall Street and the law firms, they're the ones that make sure we never have a strong government that can stand up to them. I mean, it's blatant. Did you hear that? Did you hear the point that she just made? She's mad that Wall Street is cooperating with the elected government and not removing him. She wants big corporations and big monopolies to remove Donald Trump, right? She wants a business plot against the communist president. I mean, it's really blatant. She's really mad that the big corporations are not conspiring to overthrow the president. She's really mad that Trump is asserting control over corporations. She's making Trump sound awesome right now. And Trump hasn't done that great of a job, honestly. I mean, I've been very, very disappointed by the Trump presidency, but she wants Wall Street to overthrow him because he's telling them what to do. And Wall Street needs to, exactly. That's her big point, right? And it's like, I mean, is there anyone listening to this? I mean, she makes it so obvious. Is there anyone listening to this? All the people with Trump derangement syndrome, you are fighting for Wall Street to control the White House. She's mad that Wall Street is not controlling the White House. And she wants Wall Street to control the White House. And if you're part of the Trump movement, the Stop Trump movement, you are fighting for Wall Street to control the White House. And she just came out there and said it, right? Very badly. She didn't say it very articulately. She had memorized some word salad, guardrails of democracy. But that is her position. Big business must overthrow the government. Big business must stop obeying the president. Big business should be telling the president what to do, not the other way around. She just comes out with it right there. I mean, I've never heard it so blatantly stated. But let's continue.
I know that your parents took you to protests in a stroller when you were a little kid, before you were literally able to be there to walk, and that you've talked about the civil rights movement. And
yeah, and she doesn't speak to her father. Her father denounced her campaign. And is estranged from her. Her father's a Marxist economist who taught at Stanford University, lost custody to her as a child. And he now lives in Jamaica. He's retired to Jamaica, and he and Kamala don't get along with each other. And he denounced her presidential campaign when she made jokes about, Jamaicans smoking weed. And he completely, can't stand that she became a prosecutor. And, her parents took her to protest in a stroller. Yeah, there's a lot more to the story, which I wrote about in the book, which no one else bothers to write about, but we continue.
Moral legacy being part of your moral core.
Yes.
I feel like a lot of the defenses that we tried to build up in advance of this type of a sort of would-be authoritarian takeover were about warning people about how serious the threat was and warning people about what this could mean and what we were in danger of. Now that we're up against it, though, I'm not sure that we have great skills to actually not warn about it, but fight it. And if the problem is the system collapsing and the guardrails, as you say, collapsing, and people who have power, who ought to be titans, not acting in any sort of Titanic
and standing
way.
together.
Big corporations should be overthrowing the government. I mean, this is, big corporations shouldn't be letting the elected leaders of the country tell them what to do. No, we need titans of industry. We need big corporations. And I mean, she's calling for the corporations to overthrow the government.
Because there is safety in numbers, as the saying goes.
Yes. I wonder if the American people who are repulsed by what Trump is doing and who are in public opinion polling very much against what he's doing, as you note in the book, are going to be turning their ire and their protest movement and their organizational capacity against these institutions that are failing as much as they are against Donald Trump himself and the administration, if that's the way the sort of resistance is headed?
So, one, back to how you opened the show, I mean, talk about the power being with the people and the people making that clear with their checkbooks as it relates to the suspension of Jimmy Kimmel. We saw the power of the people over the last few days, and it spoke volumes, and it moved a decision.
I'm sorry, how can she talk about the power of the people when she became the Democratic Party's nominee for vice president without getting a single vote in the primary? Right? The Democratic Party didn't have any debates and just named Biden its candidate in the election. And then Biden stepped down and she just won by default. There was no primary. There was nothing. Right? And she's talking about the power of the people. No, not a single Democrat voted for her to be the nominee in the 2024 election. Not a single one. And when she ran for the Democrat nomination in 2020, she got less votes than Tulsi Gabbard. She went down in flames. I mean, she was, and she's lecturing us about the power of the people now.
Right direction. I think that part of where we are now in terms of thinking about what the fight is, it requires us, yes, to understand that we've got this administration and this president in front of us abusing the power that the people vested him with. But we also need to understand that this is bigger than Donald Trump. You know, part of what I write about, this stuff is decades in the making, Rachel. It didn't just happen overnight. You know, so much of what has indeed overwhelmed people, not to mention just scared the stuff out of people, is what we are witnessing is a high velocity event.
Yeah.
We are witnessing something that has been happening so rapidly, and it feels chaotic. But what I would offer you is what we are witnessing is the swift implementation of a plan that was decades in the making. Decades in the making. Project 2025 didn't just drop out of thin air. That's a product of decades of work. Federalist Society, Heritage Foundation.
She's just a robot. She's just a robot. This is just, I mean, the hand gestures, the phrases that she's memorized. Project 2025 didn't just come down from nowhere. This is Hillary Clinton shit. And it's like there's nothing there. There's nothing going on between her ears. I mean, it is just gobbledygook. I mean, there's nothing going on there. Indeed.
Understand that the implementation of a plan that's about trying to get rid of the Department of Education, deregulate industries, weaken the rule of law by over a period of time, creating a system and through gerrymandering states so that we would now have the Supreme Court that we have. This stuff didn't happen.
Gerrymandering has gone on since the beginning of this country. The congressional district maps are constantly being redrawn by political parties for their own reasons. There's nothing remotely new about gerrymandering. Both parties do it, and it has gone on since the beginning of the country. It is just a reality of American politics.
Happen overnight, and it did not happen just because of an election in 2024 or even 2016. So when we talk about where the fight must go, there is the aspect of it that is about the immediate moment, such as the weight of the federal government being used to silence critics, citizens. And it must be about understanding that this did not just happen overnight, and we have to pay attention to an agenda that is not going to necessarily go away when this guy is finally termed out of office.
Well, let me ask you on that gerrymandering front. The White House has been very aggressive, pushing Republican-led states to gerrymander their maps to effectively give Republicans a major edge heading into the midterms next year. That has led to related responsive Democratic efforts, including in your home state of California. Do you support Democrats' effort to kind of fight fire with fire there? Will you be involved in that California measure, for example?
I absolutely support it. You mentioned Gavin earlier. By the way, Gavin has a great sense of humor, so you know, he's going to be fine. But
did you warn him about the hiking thing? You did.
Yeah,
okay.
I've known Gavin forever. He literally has a great sense of humor. But let me say about what he is doing with redistricting, it is absolutely the right way to go. Part of what we've got to, I think, challenge ourselves to accept is that we tend to play by the rules.
No, you don't. You tried to throw Donald Trump in prison to prevent him from winning the election. You sent the FBI, 300 FBI agents were involved in staging a riot, that ended Trump's term, and all kinds of Republicans went to jail. You literally made up a lie that Russia was responsible for Trump winning the election and kept it going and spent millions of dollars of taxpayer money on this lie that the intelligence agencies did an assessment and said Russia did not interfere in the election. No, you don't play by the rules. We tend to play by the rules. Excuse me? Like, on what planet do the Democrats play by the rules? I don't know on what is it legal to lie about Russiagate? Is it legal to frame up Donald Trump and try to throw him in prison, and turn misdemeanors into felonies? And how is that legal? How is that legal? I don't see any legal, we play by the rules. We play by the rules.
But I think this is a moment where you got to fight fire with fire.
So now the Democrats are going to really fight, because they haven't been fighting him like crazy before, apparently. Apparently trying to throw Donald Trump in jail, making up the Russiagate hoax. None of that was like really fighting. They weren't really trying, right? And then there was when Google rigged the Google search results over Hillary Clinton's health. And there were like so many examples of the Democrats breaking the rules, like threatening military coup. The FBI covering up the Hunter Biden laptop story. But apparently they got to fight fire. They got to start being tough now. They've just been so nice until then.
And so what Gavin is doing, what the California legislature is doing, what those who are supporting it are doing to say, you know what, you want to play? Then let's get in the field, let's get in the arena, and let's do this. And I support that.
I'm not going to show you any more of that interview. You can watch it. It's on YouTube. It's on, Rachel Maddow's YouTube channel, MSNBC. You can watch it. If you really want to subject yourself to that. But, it's an interesting to me, and it confirms what I said in my book, right? Everything. I am right about so many things, right? I was right about BreadTube. I said BreadTube was an intelligence operation. That was proven to be correct, right? That, ContraPoints was working with Hillary Clinton, that Steve Hassan was advising them. I was right about BreadTube. And I was right about Luigi Mangione psyching the U.S. left up for another years of lead. That was a more recent one. And I was right about Kamala Harris. I wrote this book in 2020. And as she became vice president, all the rumors and people coming out of her office said, oh my God, the verbal abuse and the meltdowns, and she refuses to prep for her interviews and screams and yells at her staff. And, no one wants to work with Harris people in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill because they're all toxic. And everything I wrote in this book is totally confirmed. And it's the fact that they're still floating her out there. They're still giving her another chance. They still want to try and see if they can somehow maneuver to get her into the White House again. After everything, it confirms, again, what I said in this book. Also, this book was right about Tulsi Gabbard. I talk a lot about Tulsi Gabbard in this book. And now Tulsi Gabbard is our intelligence director. And I talked about how Tulsi Gabbard represents a faction within the Pentagon that is opposed to, what the intelligence agencies are doing. And I was right about Tulsi Gabbard. Read chapter 3 of this book, The Geopolitical Stage. And I talk about why Tulsi Gabbard used her limited time on the debate stage to go after Kamala Harris. I know what I'm talking about. I was right about Kamala in this book. I was right about Tulsi Gabbard, our current intelligence director in this book. I tend to know what I'm talking about. But regardless, tonight I wanted to use this whole situation, right? We talked about the internet and people not caring about facts. Then we talked about Kamala the robot and all of that. We're going to talk about over-socialization. Now, this is interesting, and this is a little bit, this is going to be a little bit controversial. You know, a bad person, if that exists, right? As a Christian, I don't believe there are any good people. None of us live up to the expectation, right? All of us have committed great transgressions, and none of us are good enough. So there are no good people, right? We are all sinners. We are all flawed. And on top of that, I also don't believe that if someone does something awful, like murder, like rape or whatever, I don't believe they're eternally, if someone, is a armed robber or, whatever, I don't believe that people are irredeemable either, right? That if someone does a horrendous crime, they can still, repent. They can still see the error of their ways. That doesn't mean they should not go to jail or whatever. But I don't believe that just because someone does a horrible, horrible crime, they're a totally irredeemable person. That said, Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, not a good dude, right? And his manifesto that he wrote is really, really fucked up and crazy. It's a degrowth manifesto, right? The Unabomber, he was a terrorist in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. He was a guy who sent a bunch of letter bombs to people and killed them. And the FBI eventually caught him. It took him decades to finally catch the guy. And the reason it took him so long to catch him is because he was quite smart. And it turned out he was from Chicago. He was from a Polish family in Chicago, and he was a young man from a working class background who was exceptionally intelligent, a very, very smart man. And, he went through high school at rapid speed. He was a math genius. And he went to Harvard as a young man because he had done so well in school. And back then, that's how they did it. If you graduated early, they would let you go to Harvard. And he went to Harvard, and at Harvard, they subjected him to psychological torture. It's actually a very tragic story. You read the details of it. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail, but basically they did psychological, MK Ultra experiments on him that were very traumatic and awful. And he was a math genius, and he was somebody who was, when someone's that intelligent, right? When someone is that brilliant at mathematics as he was, sometimes they can be a little bit off in other ways, right? So, he was somebody who was a mathematical genius. He was somebody who was subjected to some pretty intense psychological torture. I'm not going to go into the details about it for MK Ultra. And he cracked, and he became a mass murderer, and he did it in opposition to industrialization. He basically said we should get rid of industry. And he basically said we don't need industry, and we need to go back to nature. And he became an anti-human kind of person. He became a Malthusian, an ultra Malthusian, and he believes that economic growth is the problem. He believes he basically turned against the human race, and he made all his bombs up in a cabin in the mountains, very far away from everybody. And he basically declared opposition to the human race. And he was basically what you might call an anarcho-primitivist. He wanted to go back to nature. He wanted to get rid of technology. He thought technology was the problem. Technology threw us out of balance with Mother Nature. And he was just an antisocial person. Part of his terrorist bombing is, he demanded that the New York Times and the Washington Post publish his manifesto. And his manifesto was horrible. It's just a horrendous degrowth screed about economic growth is bad, and we need to, technology is bad and all of this. But in his manifesto, he critiqued conservatism, he critiqued the left, and he gave a criticism of leftists and liberals that was a little bit brilliant. And he argued that leftist politics, and this is back in the 80s, he wrote this, leftist politics was becoming an expression of what he called over-socialization. Very interesting. Very, very, very interesting. So I'm going to put on the screen what this murderer, this deranged person, wrote in his manifesto about leftist politics. And we're going to discuss whether in his deranged insanity, he may have actually hit on a fair criticism of where our society is going, right? He was obviously a very antisocial person. He was also a very exceptionally intelligent person, and he was driven mad to some degree or other by our society. And this is what he wrote. Psychologists use the term socialization to designate the process by which children are trained to think and act as society demands. A person is said to be well socialized if he believes in and obeys the moral code of the society and fits in well as a functioning part of the society. The moral code of our society is so demanding that no one can think, feel, and act in a completely moral way. For example, we are not supposed to hate anyone, yet almost everyone hates somebody at some time or other, whether he admits it to himself or not. Some people are so highly socialized that the attempt to think, feel, and act morally imposes a severe burden on them. In order to avoid feelings of guilt, they continually have to deceive themselves about their own motives and find moral explanations for feelings and actions that in reality have no non-moral origin. We use the term over-socialized to describe such people. So basically, he's arguing that there are people who are so desperate to follow the rules and so desperate to conform that they drive themselves crazy. That the moral code, the virtue signaling of our society is so intense that certain people go into a really cracked psychological place because they're so scared that they will break the rules. He goes on. Over-socialization can lead to low self-esteem, a sense of powerlessness, defeatism, guilt, etc. One of the most important means by which our society socializes children is by making them feel ashamed of behavior or speech that is contrary to society's expectations. All right, and that's actually very interesting, right? It used to be that, children were controlled with physical violence. Now it's very much a game of like, we're gonna reward you for doing good, and we're gonna make you full of shame for doing bad. And, we're going to play psychological games, with young children in order to, good people think this way, bad people think this way, right? And is that really healthier, right? Is it really healthier if we're messing with our kids' minds that much, right? If we're, but anyway, he continues, right? The majority of people engage in a significant amount of naughty behavior. They lie, they commit petty thefts, they break traffic laws, they goof off at work, they hate someone, they say spiteful things, or they use some underhanded trick to get ahead of the other guy. The over-socialized person cannot do these things, or if he does them, he generates in himself a sense of shame and self-hatred. The over-socialized person cannot even experience without guilt thoughts or feelings that are contrary to the accepted morality. He cannot think unclean thoughts. And socialization is not just a matter of morality. We are socialized to conform to many norms of behavior that do not fall under the heading of morality. Thus, the over-socialized person is kept on a psychological leash and spends his life running on rails that society has laid down for him. In many over-socialized people, this results in a sense of constraint and powerlessness that can be severe hardship. We suggest that over-socialization is among the more serious cruelties that human beings inflict on one another. He's saying that basically there's some people who get into this trap of must not think, must not think, must not think, and they're constantly trying to think the right thoughts, but they constantly have impulses and feelings that go contrary to what they're told they must think. What must not think, must not think. And it causes them to have a huge amount of despair and guilt and shame and anxiety because they're constantly going, I must think the right thought. I must think the right thought. And they can't do it, right? That they just continue to think bad thoughts. We argue that a very important and influential segment of the modern left is over-socialized, and that their over-socialization is of great importance in determining the direction of modern leftism. Leftists of the over-socialized type tend to be intellectuals or members of the upper class. Notice that university intellectuals constitute the most highly socialized segment of our society, and also the most left-wing segment. The leftists of the over-socialized type tries to get off his psychological leash and assert his autonomy by rebelling. But he is not strong enough to rebel against the most basic values of our society. Let me say that again. The leftist of the over-socialized type tries to get off his psychological leash and assert his autonomy by rebelling. But usually he is not strong enough to rebel against the most basic values of society. Generally speaking, the goal of today's leftists are not in conflict with the accepted moral principle or the accepted morality. On the contrary, the left takes an accepted moral principle and adopts it as its own and accuses mainstream society of violating that principle. Wokeness. All right, leftism used to be synonymous with wanting the working class to rise up and seize control of the means of production. Oh, no. That would mean questioning the main values of our society. Now, leftism is we as a society have decided that we're against racism. And so all these people have said, you know what? We're so against racism, we're going to accuse the government of being racist. And they're not, poor people. They're not, low-income people. They're wealthy people, white people at the top of society. And they have so well swallowed the message of our government, which is we are against racism, that the only way they can possibly rebel is to go around pointing at poor people and saying, you're racist, you're racist, you're racist. And the message of our society is the equality of the sexes. And again, they couldn't possibly rebel in any other way, so they go around pointing at poor people. You're sexist, you're sexist, you're sexist. The message of our society is that we believe in LGBT equality, so they go around pointing at poor people. You're anti-gay, you're anti-trans, They're not questioning the main values of society. They're not adopting a different narrative. They're not questioning anything. They're just so desperate to fit in and so desperate to conform to society. The only way they can give an outlet to the anxiety that they feel and the self-hatred that they have because there's constantly a thought going on in their mind that is against the rules. The only way they can let it out is by going around accusing other people of violating society's rules. Now, this is a very interesting theory. I'm not saying it's fully correct, but I feel like Ted Kaczynski's perspective, as fucked up as it was, he was coming at this as a highly intelligent person, and he was very angry at the conformity of people, and he's trying to understand why it is that these people think they're revolutionaries when they're just repeating the platitudes and the principles of the society they live in. And I think that he's kind of on to something, because I have said over and over again, I watched the communist groups all be taken over by wokeness. and that I have thought about it many times. Like, what was happening? How did that happen? Right? Communism for me was the workers rising up against the capitalists. It was people that said the Vietnamese were right and the US imperialism was wrong in Vietnam. It was people who were against the FBI and COINTELPRO. And what happened? And I have often talked about a certain personality that suddenly became very present in leftist spaces. It's the kindergarten teacher. The kindergarten teacher. Sir, we're not comfortable with you like knowing facts and having information about what we're talking about. We're only interested in hearing from marginalized voices in these spaces. We're not really interested in like the history and the economics. We're interested in fighting Trump's racism and sexism. That's what we're interested in. These very dumb, anti-intellectual women, right? And there are plenty of men that went along with this, but it was a particular type of female personality. And they were afraid of thinking. It's the kindergarten teacher who really wants to make everyone draw inside the lines. And they're really mad at the kid who draws outside the lines because he's not following the rules. Johnny, we draw inside the lines here, okay? And they're really threatened by anyone actually knowing anything. They are the opposite of anyone who's at all intellectually curious. It's kind of like what I was ranting about at the beginning of the stream. They don't want to know. They're not interested in learning anything. They're interested in following the rules. And for them, being a leftist is just a way to follow the rules. So have they ever done any research on Stalin? Have they ever done any research on economics? No, because they might come across a fact or a piece of information that would cause them to break the rules. And for them, being a leftist is just about following the rules and showing everyone how much they're following the rules and looking for people who are breaking those rules and they can call them out. Right? And it's a particularly toxic personality. But pretty much every communist group in America is run by these people. And if you don't believe me, I've brought actual video evidence. I've sat on this for a while. When this video came out, I probably overreacted. It wasn't the worst thing I've ever done. I've made mistakes before, but looking back on it, when this video came out, it somehow got to, it came up in my feed or whatever, and I watched it and I just seethed with anger. I just was so angry. And the reason I was angry is because I've dealt with these people and I've spent my life studying Marxism and studying Marxism, Leninism, and all of this. And to see this big socialist group, this was the Party for Socialism and Liberation. This was their response to Lenin's 100th birthday, or the 100th anniversary of Lenin's death. They decided to put out this video on the 100th anniversary of Lenin's death. And it was three people who have never read Lenin, or if they have, they have never thought about it or seriously engaged with any of these ideas. And at the time, I left comments under the video that are still there, and PSL gave me their response. Shut up, white man. You're white. Oh, right. Oh, Caleb can't stand to see women of color talking. That was all they had. They had nasty things about my personal life and, oh, you're a sex pervert, you're all this. When, that's all they had was to come back at me. And they also then said, and you're just mad that women of color are talking. Well, no, I'm not mad that women of color are talking. I know many brilliant women of color. There are many brilliant women of color out there. These three are not. But these are the people. And what bothered me, right? I guess, right, is I already hate PSL. We all know that I can't stand PSL. But what bothered me was that PSL is a very large socialist group. They've got a few hundred members. That's big for a communist group in America. Kind of sad, isn't it? But they got a few hundred members. And this video is still one of the latest videos on their feed, right? It's been well over a year since it came out. They don't have that many videos on their YouTube channel. And of all the people in their organization they could have had come together and make this video, of all the people, this is the 3 people they picked. Right? This is who PSL thinks are the great thinkers of our time. This is what PSL thinks is a brilliant, and you read the comments, PSL members thought it was amazing. PSL members were like, wow, this is the best thing ever. So I've cut it down, and I'm just going to show you, like, this is why I cannot stand the left anymore. Like, I don't know what the hell this is, but, you know, and if anyone is watching this and you're really serious about anti-imperialism, you're really serious about stopping World War III, fighting for working families, if you're really thinking about joining the PSL, keep in mind, this is who PSL thinks should be in charge. This is who PSL thinks should be doing their socialist education. This is who PSL thinks should be their leaders. This is who PSL wants in charge. This is who you will be scared of if you join PSL. This is who will be in charge of you.
Hey everybody, my name is Rachel. I'm a member and organizer with the Party for Socialism and Liberation in Boston. I'm here today with 2 fellow organizers in the PSL, Gabby from Philly. Give it up for Philly. Philly. And Mia from New York City. And, you know, this week we are honoring Lenin in what is 100 years after his passing in 1924. And we just really want to have a conversation about Lenin, about Leninism, right? Because, you know, as we're in the streets right now for Palestine, as more and more young people are turning to socialism as the answer to some of these crises that we are experiencing under capitalism in the United States and across the world, it is so important that even 100 years plus after Lenin's passing, that we need to understand how important his contributions were to the movement. Let's get into it a little bit. Every issue, no matter what it was, I'm like, oh, look who it is emceeing, who's calling this demo, who's speaking on the mic and speaking the most facts. It was members of the PSL. It was just a consistent thread. And also, I think it's interesting because when I was on campus, maybe y'all might have experienced this, there's always those little socialism tables, and it's like white dudes. And I'm like, this has nothing to do with me.
Yeah, so first of all, right there, the reason that she joined PSL, because they were like always on the mic talking about stuff. And then there were those socialism tables, and they're like white dudes. And so she wasn't interested in that. Yeah, right there, right. So, you know, I mean, is it possible that like somebody with a white skin complexion might have a book that's like of interest to you? You know, I mean, right there, right? You know, Lenin was a white dude, you know, but it's like, she's such a, I don't even know what do you want to call her? I don't know what to call her. I'm not going to call her any names, but she couldn't look at a socialist table because the guy working at it was white. It was because if white men have a literature table about something, it is therefore not good. But PSL, they were just amazing because they were on the bullhorns talking about liberal shit at rallies, right? Literally all PSL does is have rallies around liberal stuff. So they were not interested in any of those like books and facts and information because that's like white dude. But PSL, they were like on the bullhorn at rallies. And okay, all right. So right there. So she was not interested in communism. She was not interested in economics. She was not interested in theory because that's like white dude. Okay. But PSL, they were like on the mic talking about like how abortion is awesome. And she was interested. Okay, continue.
Talking about Lenin and 2024, damn, it's 2024. But and like the struggle for Palestine is like on fire right now in the US in like a good way. People are coming out.
It's like on fire, man. It's like, yeah, like there's a lot of rallies going on, and yeah, like it's just, dude.
More consistently and for longer than I've ever seen for Palestine. Lenin has so much relevancy for people like us whose families come from like the periphery, like the third world, who like people who struggle and are under the boot of U.S. imperialism every day in like such a real sense that, you know, people, working class people in the U.S. are also under the boot of U.S. imperialism, but like, you know, like my mom or like even my dad's family, like I'm half Japanese, and I just think about.
Yeah, Japan is an imperialist country. You do realize that, like Japan is an imperialist country. Like Japan colonized Korea, Japan colonized the Philippines, Japan killed millions of people in China. Japan is an imperialist country. I just, you know, just a little historical fact, you know, to bring up. But anyway, continue, you know, but people from the colonized world, even though you're from a colonized country, you're from Japan. Okay, continue.
The U.S. bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and it's just like that's
crazy,
disgraceful.
Yeah, it is.
We're just like,
it's
disgusting.
That happened.
And the legacy, it was purely almost experimental.
It was like crazy, man, when they bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Like, man, like it was oh man, it was just oh man. I mean, it was.
Which is like such a huge thing, I think, for if anybody of like Japanese descent, that's like a big thing. But it's like that's in the legacy of Lenin and this struggle because they dropped that bomb.
It's in the legacy of like Lenin, man. I think didn't like Lenin like drop the bomb or something, man. Like I think like Lenin was like in the plane that was like dropping it, dude. So like Lenin dropped the bomb. Like it's Lenin, dude. Are they high? Are they high on drugs?
Not because it would win the war, but because they wanted to signal to the Soviet Union, like, this is what's going to happen if you try to liberate Europe, if you try to keep liberating, you know, the colonies. This is what we're going to do to you, and we're not afraid to kill civilians for that. But, like, for me to like, embrace liberation and to embrace, like, what it really means to be, like, a person of my, like, lineage and descendancy, it's like, I'm going to become the U.S.'s worst fear. I'm going to become that socialist. I'm going to become that communist who's going to say, like, you can't, I'm not going to be afraid of this. You can level a city. U.S.
capitalism.
Yeah, she's going to become the U.S.'s worst fear. That's a brilliant strategy for winning over the working class here. Go around and tell workers, I am your worst fear. Are you an American? I want you to be scared of me because I'm going to be your, what did she say?
White supremacy.
I'm going to be your worst fear.
I'm going to become that socialist. I'm going to become that communist who's going to say lineage and descendancy. It's like, I'm going to become the U.S.'s worst fear. I'm going to become that socialist. I'm going to become that communist who's going to say, like, you can't, I'm not going to be afraid of this. You can level a city. U.S. capitalism.
Yeah, she's going to come and she's going to let them know that, like, they can't do that shit. Next time they want to drop an atomic bomb, she's going to be like, no, you can't do that. I'm the U.S.'s worst fear. Oh man, this is, yeah, wow. You know, she's, you know, she's, yeah, she's just going to like level cities like the Japanese imperial. Wow. I mean, and keep in mind, this isn't just like random people, right? Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that it's wrong to have people that are, you know, new to things or whatever. This is who they picked, right? You know, of all the hundreds of people in their group, they're from 3 different cities. They bust them in. They got a camera crew. This is who they want to teach Lenin to the workers, right? This is who the American working class needs to be educated about communism by, right? Not anyone who knows anything. This is who they picked. And if you disagree, you must be racist.
Feeds off of white supremacy. It relies on white supremacy. That's why they're funding Israel so in the way that they are. It's why they're, you know, that's just why there's racism here. It's necessary to divide our class and then conquer us. And so for me, it's like, okay, well, how do we actually get rid of this? Like, what is it really going to take to end racism, right? Because if you study history, it's not like for all of human history, go be with other Black people, with other organizers, with folks who have defeated racism, folks who defeated apartheid, who defeated, you know, the feudalist state, the slaveocracy, all of these different.
Is that what has PSL defeated feudalism? Tell me about that. Did PSL go back in time to like France and they're like, no, serfs, rise up? Right? PSL defeated feudalism, apparently, right? You got to join PSL because they've like defeated feudalism and shit, man. They actually did it. You know, I mean, this is
manifestations of class society. And so again, Leninism, like the USSR, that's the first example of the workers actually taking power over their society and being able to actually, you know, improve literacy rates, like improve life expectancy, like have women's suffrage, like equality of women in the government, you know, all these different things. So yeah, Leninism and the party, I'm like, yeah, as a black.
Have they ever talked to a conservative before? I mean, it's like, you just say that, right? And that's the first time the workers have ever taken power. You do realize, like, most people in America believe that the Soviet Union killed millions of people and did nothing but, you know, starve the whole time. Like, you don't need any facts or anything. You don't need any like real evidence of what you're saying. You don't need to debunk all the anti-communist lies. No, that's that racist white guy shit that she was seeing. That's probably those like racist like socialism tables probably had facts about that. They don't want any of that, right? I mean, we don't need information and knowledge and no, we don't need that, right? And it's like on planet in America, like real people in this country think that the Soviet Union was hell on earth, that Stalin killed more people than Hitler. And your counter argument is like, they like raised literacy and stuff, man. Like it was like really neat and shit. Okay, great. And again, I mean, there are probably people in PSL who can make strong arguments in defense of the Soviet Union, but they did not pick those people. They picked these people. And again, if you disagree with it, that's because you're racist.
Woman, if you're really serious about doing something to like improve our lives,
in my own experience as a young organizer, similarly, I'm like, Black liberation, liberation. I was all about it in a very kind of an aesthetic way almost. And I think, as a young person, I didn't necessarily read that much theory. I didn't really, I'm like, what this got to do with me? But ultimately, I've come around. I think that man led a revolution.
Right.
And not only did he lead a revolution, the revolution won.
Yeah.
And it set up the first worker state in world history.
I should stop talking. I should just play out, there's a couple more minutes here. I should actually just stop talking because every time I talk, I kind of weaken the impact of this, right? I just want you to see this, right? If I keep talking, somebody else who's watching this can think, well, Caleb's just an asshole. So, I am going to let the rest of this clip speak for itself. I'm going to stop talking and just watch. Just watch. I'm not going to make fun of them. I'm not going to say anything. Just watch. Right? This is who PSL picked, right? This is who PSL thinks is the leadership that we need, right? This is how we're going to convince the millions of people in America to adopt a socialist economic system. Just watch. I'm going to stop talking.
That's no light thing. God. Read Lenin and be like, oh, I saw whatever. Like I know exactly what he was saying, whatever. It's like, no, you don't.
And I feel like most people who do that usually are not even organizing.
Literally.
Like they're not in the streets. They're not, talking to people, doing outreach, having meetings, there's all these strategic questions that people aren't having, but you can read Lenin out of context and all of a sudden you just have the answers.
Exactly.
If it was that easy, then why wouldn't we have socialism already?
That's literally insane. That's what you think, literally. But so the first time I read Lenin with comrades, I read Left Wing Communism. And when I tell you that book changed my life, Lenin is so freaking smart. Smart. But also this man is saying exactly what I needed to hear. He was saying just how possible it is for working class people and peasants, mind you, because the peasants was such a large population in Russia at the time, which isn't necessarily the case here in the United States today. he showed us that working class people can in fact take power of our situation and run society. You know, important.
Yeah. Anyone else here ever read that book? Anyone else here ever read that book? I seem to. It's not how I remember it. But again, I'm going to stop talking.
To shed your ego.
Yeah.
Because people. Don't even get me
Let's
started.
get into the ego. No, please get started. Get started.
It's like, I'm sorry. I'm actually not sorry.
Right.
But this decentralize, like, we just need to decentralize, and we just need
non-hierarchical.
What'd you say?
Non-hierarchical.
Yeah,
the non-hierarchical girlies.
Whatever. I tell you to read Tyranny of Structuralism. It's also changed my life. But
in the context of like trying to fight imperialism and build socialism, it's not just about feeling good, right? It's about, and it's not even just about being right or having the best idea. It's about how do you actually apply correct ideas
to where the people are going and where they're at and what their conditions are. Then you have no way of being in touch with them. And like we saw that with COVID, we saw that with the George Floyd uprising, and with Palestine now, like a democratic centralist party can pivot and meet the people where they're at, which is like the essence of organizing.
Yeah, I feel like democratic centralism for me is like, first of all, it strengthens the organizing so much because for me, it breeds trust. I feel like democratic centralism for me has been foundational to the trust that I have in my comrades and in the party. Because it's like, I know if I have feelings about something, if I don't like the way something is happening, I'm gonna just tell people like, why were you late for this? Like, why, why are we doing X, Y, why are we, setting up this event in this way instead of this way? Why are we having these speakers? Like, where's the visuals? What's going on with X, Y? Like, where's the communication? You said you're gonna be here at this time with these materials and you didn't do that. What happened? And I can raise those questions.
I didn't realize you need democratic centralism to complain about anything, right? Apparently, if you don't have democratic centralism, you can't complain. But with democratic centralism, you can complain if something doesn't go your way. You can raise your concerns. Apparently in no other organization, in no non-democratic centralist organization can anyone ever complain about things. It's funny, in Center for Political Innovation, we don't practice democratic centralism. And I've noticed a lot of people complain about things when people don't like what happens, but I don't know how that works. I mean, they need democratic centralism, man. Oh man, I don't know, man. Like I mean, now you know why I hate the left so much, right? You see me on here night after night talking about all this stuff, taking it seriously, but apparently I should have just, I just need to. And that was just highlights, right? I mean, I could have made you sit through. They did that for an entire hour, and I mean. It's infuriating to me as somebody who takes this seriously, that like, why in the world would a group that, that is supposedly a Marxist-Leninist party trying to build socialism, why in the world would they present themselves in that manner? And I will tell you, first of all, it's over-socialization. Right? For them, being a socialist or a communist means you're really against racism, which we're already against in this country. It merely means you're really against sexism. You're really pro-LGBT. And for them, it is just an organization through which they can carry out their over-socialization, right? They can point at people and say, you're sexist, you're racist, so it's that. But another thing about PSL, and I cannot make this point enough, right? And this is a really important point, not just in relation to PSL. And I made this point on Jamarl Thomas's show this morning, that organizing a serious revolutionary movement, you have what's called a transitional program. PSL, on the other hand, has what is called a minimum maximum program, right? And I will bring the quotes this time. I didn't realize the conversation was going to go there with Jamarl, but now I'm here and I've got the quotes for you. That PSL, their 2024 election platform It consisted of two types of demands. One type of demand was what you would call a maximum demand or a maximum program. And their maximum program was incoherent shit, stuff that has no real meaning, right? And I will show you. Hold on. All right, I've got the quotations here. I will show you. It is stuff that doesn't mean anything. It is stuff that is abstract, theoretical, podium pounding. And that was what they included as their maximum in their election campaign. Their election platform, it consisted of, right, total reorganization of the economy in a way that guarantees everyone in society will have their basic needs met. What does that mean? That sounds nice. I would like that. Have everyone have their means, but total reorganization of the economy. So what are you going to reorganize? No, it's just podium pounding, right? Their platform included, we want to turn the social order upside down and topple those who have all the money and power but do none of the work. Okay, that sounds good, but what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. It's just podium pounding, right? It consisted of the new socialist system of government would be based on direct exercise of power by the workers. Now, what does that mean? What does that actually mean? I don't know. No, I even have one of their longer books over here. Hold on. I got one of their bigger books over here, right? Right? This is Socialist Reconstruction. And you read this book, all right? And it's about what socialism will be like in America. We will abolish landlordism. What does that mean? Right? How are you going to abolish landlordism? Right? We will uproot and eradicate racism. How are you going to do that? How are you going to uproot and eradicate racism? It's like they have a magic wand and they're going to go around after the revolution and they're going to make things disappear. You know, racism, bing, gone. Landlordism, bing, gone. Inequality, bing, gone. It's nonsense. It doesn't mean anything. It is a maximum program that has no real application. And that's half of what their election platform was. It was just podium pounding. We hate rich people. We're going to build a new society. We're going to abolish racism. Bing, abolish sexism. Bing, abolish landlords. Bing. Okay. So then after that, in addition to their maximum program, they have the minimum program. What is the minimum program? The minimum program is things that Joe Biden is already doing. One of which is defend critical race theory in schools. Now, folks, critical race theory is not Marxism. Critical race theory is directly contrary to what W.E.B. Du Bois and Fred Hampton and the Black Panthers taught. Critical race theory rejects the understanding that the abolition of slavery benefited all working people in America. Critical race theory presents that white workers in the South benefited from slavery, when in reality they did not. They were competing with people who worked for free. They had horrendously low conditions. Critical race theory presents the labor movement as inherently bad because of the racism in the labor movement. Critical race theory is not Marxism, but defend critical race theory is part of their platform. Another part of their platform, the part of their platform that grinded my gears the most, was this. This is a direct quote. Fossil fuel corporations should immediately be taken over by the public and repurposed to generate renewable energy. Now, you'll notice there's a key phrase there. Immediately. Fossil fuel corporations should immediately be taken over by the public and repurposed to generate renewable energy. Also, they oppose nuclear power. So nuclear power is not an option. Now, if you immediately took every coal power plant in America, every oil burning power plant, every fossil fuel power plant in America, and immediately, not gradually over time, but immediately made it a windmill or a solar panel, we would be lucky if we had 50% of the electrification in America. Like right now in America, the power grid is collapsing. In California, they are having frequent blackouts. People can't get electricity in California. In Texas, 2 years ago or 3 years ago now, the power grid collapsed and hundreds of people died because they were cold in the winter because the power grid collapsed. And PSL is against nuclear power, and they want to immediately take every coal power plant in America and every oil power plant in America and immediately make it a windmill or a solar panel, not a nuclear plant, because they're against that. That's like big scary man stuff, nuclear power. And I mean, that's called the Green New Deal, right? That's what AOC wants to do. That's what Bernie Sanders wants to do. It's called the Green New Deal. And it would be an absolute nightmare. Working people in America need electricity. Our power plants are falling apart because our government is spending so much money on wars and tanks and bombs. And PSL wants to further take apart the power grid. Like, think about this. They want to take apart our power grid. And have they read anything about the history of communism? Did Stalin build power plants all over the USSR? He built the world's largest power plant, the Dnieper Dam. China has the biggest power plant in the world, the Three Gorges Dam. I mean, Gaddafi built the great man-made river, the world's largest irrigation system. But these people, they want to take apart. What would that mean for the working class to not have electricity? To not have electricity because Gabby or whatever her name is, thinks that electricity is racist. I mean, that's insane. And that was their platform. I just read to you. They want to take away electricity from working people. It's not enough that people died in Texas. It's not because the power grid collapsed. It's not enough that they're having blackouts all over California. No, it needs to be total. Get rid of all of the fossil fuels in America. And I mean, that right there, that's a genocidal policy. People died when the power grid collapsed in Texas. Imagine they just got rid of it. They didn't die for a couple days. They just got rid of it. That's how much PSL cares about working people. But why? Oversocialization. Oversocialization. We're all going to die from climate change. We're all going to die from climate change, Caleb. And they don't have the courage to stand up and say, you know what? Climate change shouldn't be an excuse for Malthusianism. Climate change is not the problem. And we working people shouldn't have to pay for a problem created by their system. They don't have the courage to actually question the narrative that we're all going to die from climate change. We all need to be poorer because of climate change. No. All they can do is they've swallowed the Greta Thunberg narrative. They've swallowed it. And all they can do is point at other people for not swallowing it enough. Right? The people of the world want economic development and growth. They don't. Right? They don't. And that right there, and you read it, and they want to raise the minimum wage. I'm not against that, but Joe Biden's for that. That's fine. But it's like you go through it. It's just the Democratic Party's platform mixed in with a bunch of podium pounding, abolish racism, abolish landlords, abolish sexism, democratic society where the people rule. They're just building an activist club for the Democrat Party. Okay, and that's really all that PSL is. It is a counter gang that the Democrat Party uses to run their rallies. And the only reason they talk about socialism and all of that is to recruit people. And then they use those people to stage drive-out Trump rallies, to stage abortion rallies, to stage Palestine rallies, to help the Democrat Party. Right? And we need to understand that. And the reason that they had that horrendous podcast I just played for you about Lenin is because the last thing that they want anyone in the group to do is think. Because if they think and they actually read what Lenin wrote, they would realize that helping Wall Street overthrow Trump is probably not in the interests of the international working class. And they don't want you thinking that. And if you come around and start to look like you know a little bit too much, they're going to get rid of you really fast, right? They want over-socialized people who will do what they say. And that's why PSL makes me very, very, very angry, because I actually take this seriously. And they do not, right? This is a scam. And it is a way of getting people to be foot soldiers for the Democrat Party. It is anti-intellectual, and it doesn't take seriously the desperate need of our time, which is for a real anti-imperialist movement among the broad working class. But anyway, folks, thanks for being here. We'll do our roll call. I will say,
I said I'm fed up to my gizzard with this mid-tribulation rapture garbage.
One more time.
I'm fed up to my gizzard with this mid-tribulation rapture garbage.
So anyway, names and locations, folks. Names and locations. I'm calling you out as I see you. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. We got Ryan in Kansas City. We got Lawrence Johnson in Chicago. We got Math is Racist. Chad in Spokane, Washington. Jenny in Cincinnati. Joshua Tree, Kinkle. Welcome, welcome, welcome. John McCarthy in Chicago. Saul in Mexico. Jacob in Wisconsin. Boston, Noah. Great work. Noah's written some great articles and good stuff is happening. All right. Hold up. Hold on. I'm going to have to scroll up to get everybody. Red Axis in Quebec. Phoenix. Right. Rose. Scott in Pennsylvania. Lost Sierra. Adelaida, Mexico. Best city in the world. Best city in the world. Briggy in Pennsylvania. Good to see you. The South. The Kingfish. USA. All right. David in Redding, California. Kelly, still crawling out of the womb. You're a little young to be watching this. I don't know if this is age appropriate for you if you're still crawling out of the room. Bad Wolf in Central Florida. St. David's, Bermuda. A momentary lapse in reason. Penny in Minnesota. Patrick in Maine. Good times, folks. Good times. All right. So we are taking questions for the second half of the show. And the best way to send such questions would be buy me a coffee. Buy me a coffee is the best way to send your questions for the second half of the show. There are 3 ways to send questions. I take them via Rumble Rants. And I see there's a couple already. I take them Cash App, Caleb Maupin 22, which I received a $1 Cash App from somebody that had a question. So there we go. And the best way, the absolute best way to send the question is buy me a coffee. So please send questions via Buy Me a Coffee and make my day, make me happy. Gabby in Chicago. Good to see you, Gabby. So I'm going to answer people's questions. That's what we're here to do. I will answer people's questions. And I guess, so please send questions via Buy Me a Coffee. No one has done that yet. But those who have sent their questions other ways, I will answer them. We have a $1 Cash App question, came from somebody. Hold on. I will put the Cash App question from Richard. And Richard said, is anti-immigrant sentiment in Europe legitimate? Well, Richard, my feeling is that the crisis of mass migration is very serious. The fact that people in Latin America and people in North Africa and people in the Middle East don't feel safe in their own country and are willing to swim across the Mediterranean, jump over fences, take huge risks to get to the United States or to get to Western Europe because they are so desperately poor. That is a serious situation. It is a crisis. It's one thing to say, people come to America because they want a new land. It's one thing to say people immigrate because they want a better life. But dead bodies every day along the Mexican border, that's not just natural people wanting a better life. That's drug cartels. That's extreme poverty. All right. There's a lot of the people that they find at the border don't speak Spanish. A lot of them speak indigenous languages. They've never gotten any formal education. They come from parts of South and Central America where they don't have running water. They don't have electricity. And a lot of them are fleeing drug gangs and are fleeing. They're desperate. This is a humanitarian crisis. It is a humanitarian crisis spawned by imperialism, spawned by the Western imperialist system, right? The Islamic extremist groups in Africa, the fact that Libya, the most prosperous country in the African continent, was destroyed, the fact that Syria was reduced to chaos and civil war and now has a terrorist running the government. All of this is spawned by imperialism. And the solution is economic development. We need to team up with China and team up with Russia and Nicaragua and build these countries up. There's very, very, very few migrants from Nicaragua because they have a strong economy and they're teaming up with China. They just recognize China. They have a socialist economy and their people are doing quite well. There's loads of refugees from Guatemala. There's loads of refugees from Honduras. There's loads of refugees from other parts of the world. And that, if you have a stable, prosperous country with economic development, we wouldn't have this problem. And so my disagreement with the liberals is the liberals say that, oh, there's no problem. Oh, there's no problem. Yeah, there's a problem. And yes, immigrant workers do drive down the wages of domestic workers. That is a fact. And yes, a lot of times the way these people get into the country involves gangs and criminal organizations. Yeah, that is a fact. And this is a serious issue. And liberals don't think it's a serious issue. And they say, oh, if you say that there's a problem, if you have any concern about it, you're just a big fat racist. And all we're allowed to say is, woo, immigration. It's great. No, it's not. It's a problem. And that's my disagreement with liberals, is that they don't want to have a bigger conversation because they're just virtue signaling, right? They're just, it's that over-socialization. All they can do is just follow the rules. My disagreement with conservatives, though, is all the things that conservatives advocate to deal with the immigration crisis makes it worse. For example, the ICE raids right now. If you're concerned about gangs like MS-13 and Tren de Agua and these criminal groups, why you can't support these ICE raids? Because these ICE raids deport all kinds of people. And if parents might not come home and kids are afraid their parents might not be there when they get home from school because ICE might have taken them away, if immigrant communities are terrified to cooperate with law enforcement and the police, as a result, criminal organizations are going to flourish. These ICE raids are actually a really, really big help to the criminal gangs in the immigrant community because it's forcing the immigrants more into the shadows, making them more afraid. And as a result, when you're in the shadows, you work with shadowy elements. When you are more legal and you're more established, then you tend to play by the rules. Immigrant workers driving down the wages of American workers. Is that legal? No. It is illegal to pay anyone less than minimum wage, right? However, why is it they get away with paying immigrant workers poverty wages? Because they can't do anything about it, because they're afraid of being deported. However, in New York City, you had the hot and crusty strike, and various places where immigrants are not afraid, right? New York City is a sanctuary city. You have immigrant workers who will actually organize and demand higher pay and stop driving the wages down. However, if immigrants are terrified of being deported, they're definitely not going to step up and demand that their employer pay them better. And they're going to be more and more afraid, and they're going to accept lower and lower pay. Building a big giant wall on the border. Okay, if you build a big giant wall along the border and make it super hard for people to actually cross, how are people going to get into the country? They're going to have to be smuggled in. Who smuggles them in? Gangs. Everything that the Trump movement wants to do to deal with the crisis of mass migration would make it worse. The only solution is economic development. What is actually going on, and I will be honest with you about this, and this is something that the anti-Trump people are kind of right about, but they don't understand, is that Donald Trump realizes the FBI is pretty much against him. Now, he put Kash Patel in charge, and they indicted Comey, but Trump realizes the FBI are not his friends, and the CIA are not his friends. But he realizes that ICE, they like him. So Trump is trying to beef up ICE to be his wing of the federal policing and intelligence agencies to support him. And he's trying to make ICE his section of the deep state. That's what's going on. And so he's building up ICE. He's increasing their funding. He's sending them to different parts of the country to carry out more operations. This is Trump fighting back and building up his own faction in the ruling class. Right? That's basically what's going on, is that a lot of the policing agencies are anti-Trump, so Trump is building up his own faction, his own, wing of the policing and intelligence agencies. That's what's going on. And that a lot of what ICE has done in places like Portland hasn't been related to immigration. It's just, they had ICE and DHS people, going after protesters and stuff. And, and I think the anti-Trump people are right that that's what he's doing. I don't blame Trump for doing it. I just wish he would do it in a way that was not, related to immigration, because he's making the problem worse. And that there's something psychologically unhealthy about what ICE is doing, right? That there's an element of like gleefully fucking people up, right? And that I saw that with local police in Cleveland. I videotaped an act of police brutality, got a young black woman acquitted in court. Why? Because I'm a tremendous racist and white supremacist and Ku Klux Klansman. That's why, right? I saw the police beating up this young woman. I video recorded it, and she got acquitted in court. And I did that because I'm just an evil person, just so you know. But regardless, there is this weird element of like, we think immigrants are bad people who shouldn't be in our country, so we enjoy watching them get fucked up by law enforcement. That's evil, right? That's evil. It's wrong. And that's one of the most deeply unhealthy things about the Trump camp, is that there is this kind of weird thing. I will say, though, sometimes I wonder, I attended the No Kings rally in LA. Maybe we'll put the video on of that. And sometimes I wonder if the anti-Trump movement and the Trump movement are like controlled by the same people. Because right now, ICE is violating due process. They arrest people that are citizens, that are fully legal here in the country, and hold them. And that's not legal, right? And due process rights are being violated and all of that. And the left conveniently skips talking about that. You can't talk about that. You just have to say no one is illegal and America was stolen from the Native Americans, and so ICE is illegitimate. Well, ICE is not illegitimate. The U.S. government has the right to enforce its immigration laws. However, we do have the Constitution. We do have the right to due process, and people that are legal citizens can't be deported. So ICE is doing illegal things. The FBI does illegal things. The CIA does illegal things. There's a lot of illegal things going on in our government, but ICE is doing illegal things. I would like ICE not to do those illegal things, but that's not what the conversation is about. The conversation is about no human being is illegal. This is stolen land. This is a racist country. It's like, okay, well, we can't pass a law that America can't exist because this is a racist country. We can't pass, but, we could actually force ICE to respect people's rights. But we can't do that thanks to the left. Right now, it's just, I mean, you just have to be opposed to any enforcement of immigration laws. And if you agree with any enforcement, you're a big fat racist. And, no one is illegal and Trump is a dictator. And it's like, wait a second. Like, ICE is actually breaking the law. But if we're not allowed to discuss the law, if we just have to oppose the law itself, we can't have that conversation. Right. And it's like something's off, I will say. Obama continued the Bush policy of saying he had the right to detain people. Obama escalated to killing U.S. citizens with drones. He said, I have the right to execute U.S. citizens that are declared enemy combatants. Bush started the policy of murdering people with drones that he considered to be terrorists. And then Obama said, I can murder even U.S. citizens that are considered to be terrorists without due process of law. He continued the indefinite detention thing. And here we are. So I believe in freedom and I believe in our civil liberties. And I believe ICE, while I understand why Trump is beefing them up, I wish he could create his own faction of the deep state that wasn't tied in with stupid immigration stuff. And I also, at the same time, think our civil liberties should be protected. And I see ICE doing things that deeply concern me, deporting people to El Salvador. I mean, there's a lot of things that are going on that are a problem. And the way the debate is being framed, you can't talk about it. People that support Trump say, look, illegal immigrants, undocumented workers have no right to be in this country. That's how they put it. Well, I mean, that might be true, right? I mean, there are, legal issues, here, right? We do have green cards. We do have, a citizenship process. I mean, we do have, custom border patrol at the border. I mean, there are procedures around these things. And to most people, the argument is, should we enforce the law or not? Well, if the argument remains, should we enforce the law or not, the people who say we should enforce our laws are going to win the argument. And most people kind of understand it that way, right? If there's a law and it applies to everybody, it applies to everybody, right? And the woke left might disagree with that. But at the same time, if that's the terms of the debate, the Trump people and ICE are going to win the debate with most people. And if you live under a rock, you don't realize that, right? And that's the problem. That these, I bet the three people in that video have no idea that to most people in America, if you pose the question, should people be deported for being in this country illegally? The majority of Americans will say yes. Right? Now, if you live in a liberal bubble, you won't know that. But most people, if you just phrase the question, should immigration laws be enforced? Most people will say yes. And if that's the terms of the debate, we can't talk about the fact there are bigger problems here. There are very, very big problems here. Not just the fact that people are coming to this country in huge numbers, but also the fact that, immigration customs enforcement is engaged in activities that violate not just the rights of people that are, accused of being here illegally, but also of citizens, right? And if we can't have this conversation, so I don't know. I've given you a long answer, Richard, and I hope that that's helpful. But, I do believe people have the right to be outraged about mass migration. I just don't believe that the policies that a lot of these forces are advocating are actually going to help. But you need to put forward a real policy, right? You have to put forward a real policy. And that was my other critique. You can't just answer it with a feeling, right? You might say no one is illegal. That's a philosophical question. What does it mean to be illegal, right? The USA was stolen from Native Americans. That's a great philosophical question. You and I can talk over coffee. But what should the government do? That's a real policy. Now, I don't think deporting millions of people from the country and, having raids to deport all undocumented workers is a good thing. I don't think that's a good thing. I don't think that would be good for the country. But I have to talk about it from the standpoint of what's good for the country. And that there are so many undocumented workers in America right now that to deport them all would require setting up some kind of authoritarian police state and mobilizing the population by the millions. It would be a nightmare. You can't actually do that. And we don't want to live in a country where they would actually try to deport every undocumented person. That would be insane. Right? So aside from deporting every undocumented person, which is off the table, what do we do about it? Well, obviously, we need a pathway to citizenship. We need a pathway to citizenship. We need economic development so that the people aren't trying to come here in big numbers. There's a lot of things we need to do. We need to enforce the minimum wage laws so that immigrant workers don't drive down domestic wages. That's a big point. There's a lot of things there. But anyway, I digress. But anyway, I hope that answers your question. But anyway, so a couple people have sent Buy Me a Coffees. I'll just remind you all that you can send your questions 3 ways. There are 3 ways to send your questions. One is Rumble Rant. The second is Caleb Maupin 22 on Cash App. But the absolute best way to send the question is Buy Me a Coffee. Buy Me a Coffee. Best way. And 2 people have done that. So, yeah. There we go. Now I will answer the Buy Me a Coffees that have come in. Pro Peace Punk says, of the many different PSLs that misconstrue the political position with a leftist figurehead, like that PSL Leninism video, is to prop up the duopoly. How do actual imperialist theorists pry the imperialist curious Americans away from being misled by the pro-duopoly orgs like PSL? All right. That's an interesting question. Now, first of all, he's saying that PSL is pro-duopoly. Now, I agree with you. That is not obvious on the surface, right? Because they did run their own candidate. So some people are going to say, well, PSL doesn't want to, they're not pro-Democrats and Republicans, Caleb. They ran their own candidate. Well, I just showed you that their electoral campaign was the Biden campaign. And I also, what PSL does is they push Trump derangement syndrome. They push the notion that Trump is a new Hitler. They organize hysterical anti-Trump rallies. And they put on a Palestine conference that Noah and I went to that was just a Democrat Party rally. I mean, it was Hassan Piker and Rashida Tlaib, and it was just a Democrat Party rally, basically, with PSL people doing all the work for free. PSL is part of the Democrat Party protest machine. They do run their own campaigns, and that's not obvious to most people. But if you see how they called for longer lockdowns when lockdowns were devastating working people, if you see how they protested around, one of our people, one of our former members was in PSL in Wisconsin. He was a PSL member for 3 years. And during that entire 3 years, they did nothing but protest for abortion and protest against Kyle Rittenhouse for 3 years. That was all they did. They did not have a single educational about Cuba or Venezuela. They did not, raise any economic demands. They did not do any anti-imperialist work. It was abortion, 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 Kyle Rittenhouse, Kyle Rittenhouse, Kyle Rittenhouse. Well, any organization that does that for 3 years straight, you're dealing with a wing of the Democrat Party, right? That's basically what you're doing, right? And I could give you many examples. I mean, that it gets to be so ridiculous. Ben Norton, who's this big social media voice. For a long time, he lived in Nicaragua. Nicaragua is a socialist country in Central America. Nicaragua has the strictest anti-abortion laws of any country in the world. And he was living there. And he was living in a socialist country that has very strict anti-abortion laws. And when the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade, he tweeted out that anyone who's against abortion is a fascist. And he was literally living in a country that had the strictest anti-abortion laws in the world. And it was a socialist country, and he was claiming to support the country. Now, how did he do that? Ben Norton is not a dumb guy. He's just an opportunist, right? And it's like you're living in Nicaragua that has the strictest anti-abortion laws in the world. And you're glorifying Nicaragua, you're claiming you support them as a socialist, and then you tweet out that anyone who opposes abortion is a fascist, whatever. And it's like you're literally glorifying a government that opposes abortion more than the American government ever has. I mean, and it's like there's an element of like PSL is most likely, the People's Forum has a lot of money behind it. I believe that PSL is trying to insert woke politics into China. That is what I believe. I believe they're an intelligence operation primarily aimed at China, also aimed at Cuba and Nicaragua and other places. But basically, they facilitate trips to these countries, they establish relationships, and they are lobbying these countries to think the Democrats are their friends. And on top of that, they are probably meeting with LGBT activists in these countries, with feminist activists in these countries, and helping the U.S. intelligence apparatus connect with color revolutionaries, right? And that's probably what's happening. I don't know for a fact that that is what is happening, but that seems to me like most likely what is happening. If you look at who organizes the Trump derangement protests, the Black Lives Matter rallies, the abortion rallies, it's George Soros. And that's all PSL does, is whatever George Soros is organizing around, they do the vaguely anti-imperialist version of what George Soros is doing. And that's what makes me think this is probably, it's probably about, getting their people to China and finding the gays in China that can go out and riot against the Chinese government, finding the gays in Cuba that can go out and riot against Fidel Castro. That's probably what's going on there, right? Because it doesn't make any sense. If you believe that, anyone who's opposed to abortion and wants to outlaw abortion is a fascist, how can you support Daniel Ortega? That doesn't make any sense, right? It doesn't make any sense, right? And and it's like if you support Iran, how can you oppose nuclear power, right? It's like there's so many things that just don't line up. It's like the countries they're claiming to support and their politics in America do not compute. And that's really, really obvious. And if you talk to a PSL member, they know nothing about ideology. All they know is like racism's like bad, man. And I just showed you the smartest people in PSL. I just showed you a video of the smartest members that's your typical PSL member. And if you are intelligent, they want you out of there really, really quick. If you're somebody who might be able to tell what's going on and might be like, wait a second, they want you out of there. They want you out. They want you gone, right? If you're actually intelligent. So the next part of the question, so now we've established why PSL is a duopoly linked organization. What we have done with CPI is we have put forward our 4-point program, our transitional program, right? Which is 4 policies that could be implemented. A national bank. That's something most people can understand. Imagine that we had a bank, a government bank that was injecting credit into communities, right? Public control of our natural resources. Many countries in the world have nationalized their resources. We could do that over here, right? A works progress administration, hire millions of unemployed people and put them to work rebuilding the country. And then from there, create an economic bill of rights to provide education and healthcare. Those are 4 policies that people could see enacted. However, those 4 policies would cut into the power of the big oil monopolies, cut into the power of the international bankers, and would require building a mass movement and a government mobilizing the population to break the power of the big monopolies. So we have our 4-point plan. We are having rallies all over the country on October 4th, and our rallies will be calling for building the peace bridge over the Bering Sea, right? Why is it with Russia and their far east right there, right? We have the far east of Russia. Here, I'll put the map on the screen. The far east of Russia, it has this, this amazing economic growth story going on, right? And at the same time, we in America are not doing so well economically, if you haven't noticed. Why do we not build a bridge over the Bering Sea? Right? Why do we not build the peace bridge? And that is a demand that, again, it makes sense to most people. All right, build the peace bridge. I understand that, right? But why aren't we doing it? Because Russia bad. Russia's our enemy. Well, what did Russia ever do to us, right? Why should we not have jobs? All the jobs and all the economic opportunity that could be created by the peace bridge, we can't have it because of Russia. That doesn't make any sense, right? And people get that, right? And educating people. We distributed 1,000 copies of this book about Kamala Harris at the Democrat convention in 2024. 1,000 copies, right? We have distributed our book about the Houthis, educating people about Ansar Allah, the Houthi movement, in bulk all across this country. In the lead up to our convention, we got over 1,000 copies of it out. We got another 1,000 copies out at the Palestine convention that just happened. That PSL put on. They kicked us out of it. Yeah, we do mass outreach and education. We have rallies about Ibrahim Traore. This is another thing. Right, well, put the Traore rally on. This was a great thing we did when all of our people were gathered for our 7-day program in Illinois to surrounding our convention. We had this amazing rally.
In Rockford, Illinois, and we're here to say that Ibrahim Traore is right and AFRICOM is wrong.
Hands off Traore! Hands off Africa! Hands off Traore! Hands off Africa! Hands off Traore! Hands off Africa! Hands off Traore!
Today we're speaking about Ibrahim Traore, all the good things he has done. He is actually a leader that's provided true inspiration, not just for his people of Burkina Faso, but for everyone around the world.
Are in the belly of what is happening around the world. We get up, we go to work, we go home, we get online. We pretend like we don't know, but we do know. We feel the crushing imperialist boot on our necks, and can we get it off? Yes, we can!
Yes, we can!
Fuck yeah!
Fuck yeah!
We can!
Yes, we can!
Don't let them stop you.
Ibrahim Traore is the captain, president, Ibrahim Traore, the traditional president of Burkina Faso.
I think he's a remarkable leader for the whole world. Whenever I see him, I'm really compelled by him.
Taking hands off of Ibrahim Traore, and we're representing the Center for Political Innovation because we want economic development. We don't want degrowth.
People are liking it, huh?
Yeah, a lot of people are receptive or at least curious.
And I think if we take an example like this, and stand up for countries like this and learn from it, we too have a better prosperity, not just for ourselves now, but for generations to come.
So unique and so different from the various other leaders of the world. He's amazing to me.
Down with NATO!
Down with NATO!
Hands off Africa!
Hands off Africa!
Down with NATO!
Down with NATO!
Hands off Africa!
Hands off Africa!
We are an energized group fighting for working families. We are an energized group fighting for the world. We want this message to get out to everyone, far and wide, to get off your butts, to make it happen. We are one because we are in this fight together.
We've got Africa's Flame, the rise of Ibrahim Traore, the current president of Burkina Faso, who's doing beautiful, amazing things, building up the country for his people.
They kicked out the French. They formed an alliance with Mali and Niger. Security defense, economic defense. Traore is leading an agricultural revolution. They are training soldiers to be farmers. They're training farmers to be soldiers. And he's a Muslim. And it is now a crime in Burkina Faso to stir up religious division that undermines the unity of the country.
So we're supporting a real role model here.
Let me tell you a little bit about this man, Ibrahim Traore. This man is not only a leader for Burkina Faso who cares about the people of Africa and the people of the world, who's standing with Russia, who's standing with the people of the world against U.S. imperialism. And it's because that he's doing that they've made so many attempts on his life.
I would be willing to put my life on the line for him, to protect him, because he represents hope. He represents true hope and progress in this world, and I pray to God that nothing happens to him.
And my question is this: where does value come from? Where does value come from? They want you to think value comes down from the sky. They want you to think value comes from Wall Street derivative ripoff schemes. They want you to think value comes from Facebook likes and shares and hits. They want you to think value is magical. But the answer to where value comes from is within you. It is within you. It is your human labor power, your creativity. That is the source of all wealth in this world.
Yes.
And if we want to have a strong economy, we need to invest in human beings, invest in people, invest in children so they grow up and get an education and become strong and powerful and effective and smart. We need to invest in communities. We need to invest in families. That is the future.
Freedom. I think of economic growth. I think of someone who truly cares about the needs of the people and not the top 1% or the top 0.01% or whatever it is, which is the rest of the world seems to be focused on in the West anyway. We need economic development for everyone, not just for the people at the top. And that's the kind of system we're living under, why people are struggling so much.
We are here to proclaim that we will not be stopped. We will not let the imperialists threaten us. We will not let them intimidate us. We are CPI and we are here to fight for Africa.
Yeah. Like you guys in the US, ourselves in Australia, we're being held back by big finance, and we need to have a government of action that fights working families and ordinary working people.
Investing millions and millions of francs to revamp stadiums and hold games for youth sports, so they can be healthy and strong, and they can build an identity of their own in working together. Abraham Traore was a soccer player himself, and he just held a very friendly game with other professional soccer players, and he won 3 matches. How about that? Go Traore!
Go Traore! Let all nations have self-determination and develop peaceful relationships, peaceful trade with each other, and innovate and share that innovation with each other so that we can live in peace, prosperity, and harmony, because there is plenty to go around.
This is the model of what can be here. You must fight. You must get up. You must be brave. Don't let them tell you that your words have no meaning, that they'll throw you in jail if you speak up. The more of us that speak up, what happens? Then more speak up, and more speak up. Don't let that frighten you. Get off your butts, do something about it. Fight for a future that you want.
We need a world where people refuse to take advantage of the downtrodden. We need to take an alternative road, because the road we're going is leading us to nowhere but to oblivion.
And this leader in Africa is a leader who understands that. And that is why he is investing in his people. He is providing free health care to mothers in the hospital. He is providing university education to his people. Not only is college free, but while you're there, you get a stipend, a paycheck, so you can focus on your studies. You don't have to work. Imagine that. The young people of Burkina Faso, in a way, are richer than all the young people in America. You go to college in America, you're going to be in student debt for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, 20 years. In Burkina Faso, not only do you not go into student debt, but on top of that, you get a paycheck while you're there so you can pay your bills and focus on your studies. He is enabling millions and millions of people to rise up from poverty, to launch their own farms, to pave their roads. Fisheries are opening up. Pineapple orchards are opening up. This is a pro-growth president who invests in human beings and invests in his people.
There's nothing more important right now happening in the world than what's happening right here, in the belly of the beast, in the belly of imperialism. Can we make this happen? Yes. Yes, it can happen.
What we need is a win-win situation where we can find an economic system or deals or contracts whereby what makes America prosper also makes our trading prosper.
Better world is possible, but understand, if we don't believe that, if we listen to those who tell us that nothing is possible, then that's what we will get. We will get nothing.
Hands off Africa! Hands off Africa! Hands off Africa!
What can I say about imperialism, other than the fact that it is a crushing force that is now taking its way from the tentacles of the United States and around the world, sucking the resources from other countries, impoverishing them, degrowing them, crushing them, making sure that they can't become everything that they have dreamt of being.
Organizations such as the Center for Political Innovation is critical to spreading the awareness, the knowledge of leaders such as Ibrahim Traore.
And right now, we don't have a government that invests in people. We have a government that invests in destroying people, a government that invests in bombs and tanks and weapons and prisons for profit, a government that defends drug cartels, a government that arms terrorist groups. And that is not the way forward. There's a small group of very, very rich people who sit at the top of the world. And they've decided that the only way they can keep their throne and keep themselves at the top is to stop human progress. And they're wrong, because there is no limit to growth. There is no limit to growth. Human creativity and brilliance is unlimited. And we can build and we can construct.
We got books! We got books!
I saw two cars pull up at the stop sign, and then they had their lights, they were flashing to get our attention. And then I saw a fist come out, and then I was like, oh yes, there's somebody who absolutely understands what we're doing. And then I saw a woman come out, and she started honking her horn, and then I didn't know there was a car behind her, and then we just started cheering. They were just honking. I heard them say thank you, because now they know what we're about, what we were doing, what we're standing for, why we're out here on this road, getting the attention of those who pass by. So they all honked. The car behind them came out and they honked as well. And they seemed extremely supportive, very happy that we're out here bringing awareness, you know, in a place where, likely of all places, would you see a big giant sign, a big, poster of Ibrahim Traore. But here we are, CPI, bringing awareness, making it happen, and understanding that people, the more we do this, it'll catch fire. And it seems as though it already has.
I think, there's been a number of people that have positive reactions to our rally, to the banner, to our chants, to our speeches.
We will march together, we will fight together, no matter who you are, no matter what political persuasion, no matter what race, because we are all here fighting a class struggle that is more than the sum of its parts. We are one.
But I think if you're getting positive reactions like that out here, that's a very good sign. And it's a sign of progress, and it's a sign that people are starting to wake up.
Ibrahim Traore is working with Russia bad! Russia bad! Oh my God, Russia bad! No, Ibrahim Traore went to the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II in Russia, and he got to see their equipment, and he got to see their spirit of unity and their spirit of cooperation, and how they were able to defeat fascism, which we've never forgiven them for. So, also Ibrahim Traore is investing in education for his students to go to Russia, and Russia has students coming to Burkina Faso so they can learn each other's culture and they can build peaceful nuclear energy.
Yay!
Peaceful nuclear energy. Just
Peaceful
like
nuclear
Iran.
energy. All right. And yes, Penny has got the first section of the audiobook of Ibrahim Traore. And that's great. Penny's book, we have published a book about Ibrahim Traore, Africa's Flame, the Rise of Ibrahim Traore. And there's going to be an audiobook. The first section of the audiobook is already up, which is great. We are raising awareness. We are anti-imperialists. And that's what we do. All right, so somebody else bought a coffee, but it was blank. They just said, someone bought a coffee. Well, thank you, someone. I appreciate it. That's what's great about Buy Me a Coffee. You can be anonymous if you want to ask your question. So please send more questions. And there's quite a few Rumble rants that have come in. So I guess we'll start with the Rumble rants. But yeah, send more questions. That would be great. All right, cool. So we'll start doing Rumble rants. Hempcar says, what do you make of Vietnam closing bank accounts? And he sends me
Vietnam bank account purge boosts Bitcoin appeal. Vietnam's recent decision to delete over 86 million bank accounts underscores concerns over centralized control of personal finances. That's interesting. All right. The State Bank of Vietnam deleted 86 million bank accounts. Are there 86 million people in Vietnam? There's 101 million people in the country. So that's a lot of bank accounts they just deleted. Yeah, that's a pretty dramatic move. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I was not aware that this happened. Okay, interesting. All right, it talks about centralized banking systems, and they do have a centralized banking system in Vietnam. That is true. Wow, I don't even know what to say. 86 million is a lot. I'd be curious to see what's in the Vietnamese press about that. Vietnam is not a capitalist country. It is a socialist country, a socialist-oriented market economy. And, they do have state control over the banking sector. And, wow, that's big. China launches probe into Mexico tariffs against China and third parties. Warns unilateral trade decision and caving to pressure from the U.S. undermines market stability and confidence. Yeah. Trump is playing games with the tariffs, trying to get favors out of countries, and it's dumb. And, I don't know what more to say about it. It's just dumb. The tariff stuff, in theory, it should create more American jobs. It's not happening, but there we go. Jyoti, and I assume this refers to Jyoti Brar, our friend from Britain, said that it's two fighting factions of the capitalist ruling class. I would agree. And Jyoti is correct. And that's what I've been saying for a long time. That's what my Kamala Harris book was about. It's what I said in here. I talked about different factions in the ruling class and who Tulsi's aligned with and who Kamala's aligned with. And I wrote a book called Divisions in the Ruling Class. And actually, I learned from Jyoti. I had, forgotten. If you read The End of Capital, Marx talks about the Chartist movement and how the first working class movement that emerged in Britain, it was the first working class movement in history, the Chartist movement for the 12-hour workday, was because of a division in the ruling class. And it was the landowning capitalists versus the factory owners. And the landowning capitalists supported the factory workers, demanding the 12-hour day, as there was a struggle between the landed aristocracy and the industrialists, right? And that goes back to that whole thing. So that's particularly interesting. So there we go. Fights in the ruling class are something that are constant. And there is this kind of elementary school approach that says, oh, there's no fights in the ruling class. It's like, yeah, there are. How do you combat the claim that Russia is a dictatorship? Well, because Putin is wildly popular. I have been there. I observed the election. I've talked to Russians. Putin is wildly, wildly popular in the country. Wildly popular. And, the idea that he wouldn't be the winner of the election after, he saved the country from the nightmare of the fall of the Soviet Union. I will put on, I actually did an interview about the Russian elections while I was there. So, I can put that on, actually. That might be a good thing to, but yeah, Russia is there corruption there? They have issues, sure, like any other country. But the idea that Putin is not the legit president, that he does not have the consent of the governed, that's absurd. If you lived there, you know that the other parties participated in the election, but they knew they weren't going to win. And they knew that Putin is just wildly popular for getting the job done. But yeah, this is the interview that I gave when I was in Russia observing the election, in 2024.
To our special continued coverage here for the Russian election 2024, Rory Souchet, Rachel Rubel, and Caleb Moffin, our senior U.S. correspondent. If you're not in Washington, you're in New York. If you're not in New York, you're in Washington. You're always up and down the eastern seaboard, mate. Look, it's a predictable first question because you're the best one to ask it too. How is the Russian election result going down in D.C.?
Well, they're not thrilled, as you can imagine. In the lead up to this election, it was pretty clear they didn't want it to happen. They don't consider it legitimate. We actually heard the U.S. State Department go as far as saying that they would hold accountable those who observed it, like myself. I was an observer of the election. And it's pretty wild because the argument they have against the election really just comes down to the fact that the Russian president has been in office a long time. And I always remind people that in the United States, we have a very beloved president named Roosevelt. And he was elected in 1932 and 1936, elected again in 1940, and elected again in 1944. And why? Because one, he enacted a lot of economic reforms that really improved people's lives. And number two, he unified the country to defeat the Nazis and, stand with the Soviet Union and China against fascism. So he was widely loved. And, both of my grandparents on both sides, they were Republicans. But for them, Roosevelt was just the president. He was above politics. He was kind of a symbol of what had gotten them through the period of the Great Depression and the Second World War. And so if you look at that and you look at that history, we're not taught in the United States that Roosevelt was a dictator. No one considers him to be a dictator. It's just that he was a leader that stood and, seized the moment and delivered and achieved great things and became kind of the symbol of national victory and national recovery. And I think that's a way we can look at this election when looking at it through an American lens. Of course, U.S. leaders don't want to put it that way.
Putin has been in power for a long time. This will be his fifth presidential term. I know that you, Caleb, you took part in the World Youth Forum earlier this month in Sochi. A lot of young people, they don't know a Russia without Putin. And Putin, let's be honest, he's not a young guy. He's 71 years old. How do young people feel about him?
Well, I got to tell you, when I had the opportunity to be in the room with the Russian president, with 300 other young people in the Atom Hall there in Sochi at the World Youth Festival, and I got the opportunity to ask him a question, there's just something about him. He has this way of engaging with people. He has this charm that it's really hard to put your finger on. I don't think it comes across through television. You have to be in the room with him. You can see this is somebody who really takes politics seriously and has a really deep understanding of how human beings relate to each other and how societies develop over time. I thanked him for his very dynamic interview with Tucker Carlson because I said it showed a different kind of leadership. In the United States, politics is all about sound bites and scandal and gossip. That's not the approach he takes. He draws from the history of this country and of this region going back thousands of years, developing a more scientific view of statecraft.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to jump in quickly because, when you go back to Tucker Carlson sitting down with Putin, one of the things I think, one of the big tsunamis that came off that was the fact that people in the West, particularly Americans, were given the opportunity to realize that Putin is, a very well-spoken man. He's a very intelligent man, very well-educated. He knows his history. He knows all of his economics. He throws out numbers all day long. And there's poor old Joe Biden, who doesn't know what he had for breakfast today, right?
Indeed. I mean, it's frightening to see Joe Biden. And also, what's even more frightening is his vice president, Kamala Harris, is less popular than he is.
Yeah, terrifying.
Which is how can you be less popular than Joe Biden is? So, it's very frightening to look at. And, you have Kamala Harris and you see her on the cameras where she's just kind of repeating these phrases.
And cackling.
Yeah, I mean, this is very disturbing. And, people look at Donald Trump and, there's a possibility that he could win coming up. I think it's a very big possibility he could win at the polls. But it seems like our political establishment in the United States has circled their wagons and said that won't happen. Now, a lot could change between now and November when we have the U.S. presidential election, but it's not looking good. And, being here and seeing the election here and then contrasting it to the election I'll be covering in a few months in the United States, it makes one do a lot of thinking about different types of civilizations.
Caleb, the Communist Party candidate in this election came in second. I know in the West, when we hear the term communist or communism, we go, ooh, bad, scary. But I'm just wondering, what's the appeal here with the communist legacy in the country? I mean, is it the legacy really, or is there a new appeal to this?
Well, it's interesting because the Communist Party is one political party. But you can see, especially in light of the special military operation, there's a lot of nostalgia for the achievements of the Soviet Union and defeating the Nazis, inventing space travel, industrializing the country. It's funny because in the United States, you'll have people say, well, haven't you ever talked to anyone who actually lived under communism? Well, if you're here in Russia, many people refer to the Communist Party as being the party of the pensioners and the retirees, people who do remember, and that the fall of the Soviet Union was certainly a devastating moment in Russia's history. So you can understand the
the widespread nostalgia. But at the same time, you know, I mean, this is not the Soviet Union anymore. I mean, that's very clear. I mean, and I see a lot of religious imagery here, too. The Soviet Union was a very atheistic state, but I see a lot of love for Christianity. I see a lot of religious imagery and religious references.
All over the place.
Absolutely.
Gorgeous churches here.
Absolutely.
Caleb, sorry, carry on.
Oh, no, I was just saying, I mean, it's interesting that, I mean, that Russia draws from many aspects of its past
it really
to
does.
present itself in our time,
And you talk about the past, but, you know, the present and the future. You were down at the annual Youth Forum Festival down in Sochi. I was there as well. 30,000 students, basically, and 5,000 volunteers. It was an enormous turnout. And you think, was it 10 years or more ago, that you had the Winter Olympics down there in Sochi? So you have all this infrastructure, these stadiums, and all this. So you can send thousands of people there. One thing that touched me was that when I was speaking to the students, they weren't just Russian. They had come from all over the world. But I was speaking to them. There was this energy. I could feel this kind of enthusiasm, this optimism. It was like they were looking at like a sunrise. They had this amazing excitement for the future. Where is that coming from? How do you read into that?
Well, I would say that probably a big source of that was the crew of young Russian volunteers that were there. They mobilized young people from all over this country, from many different regions, to be there and guide us around and take us to different places and to be full of enthusiasm and giving us high fives every morning as we're on our way to the festival. And I thought about, you know, in the United States, I don't know if our government would be able to get a crowd of young people to be that way, to work together, to deal with the stresses of that festival, because it was certainly, you know, I can imagine when you have, you know, 188 different countries, delegations from them, getting them everywhere, getting them where they need to go, getting everyone their food and getting them to the hotels and getting them their badges and their identifications could be very stressful. But that crew of young people, thousands of young patriotic Russian volunteers who made it their mission to kind of solidify Russia's friendship with youth from different countries around the world. I was very, very impressed with the enthusiasm, with the endurance, with the patience of those volunteers.
Yeah, well said.
This, of course, this election is very important, a big election here, of course, but of course we have the U.S. presidential election coming up later this year. Do you think the result of this election will have any impact on the U.S. presidential election? And how will the U.S. election have an impact on relations with Russia, you think?
Well, I think one thing that's very clear, and I think a good sign of this has been Victoria Nuland's recent resignation.
Oh, yeah, goodbye.
Is that this Ukraine conflict is not something Joe Biden wants to take to the polls with him in November. The American public is just not with him on this. Billions and billions of dollars for Ukraine, while our roads and bridges are falling apart, while our education system in the United States is a joke. This is not something Joe Biden wants to be a topic of conversation in November. Now, I'm curious, because Donald Trump seems to be having it both ways. He says, well, the conflict never would have happened if he'd been president. Well, I mean, it's happening. So, you know, that's kind of a moot point. He says, well, he can resolve it. But then other times he's saying he wants more weapons in Ukraine. It's not clear where Trump really stands on this. But what is interesting to me is that the American foreign policy establishment has decided they don't like Donald Trump. John Bolton said that if Donald Trump were ever reelected, that would be the end of the NATO alliance. So that's shocking words to me.
Well, look, there may be some truth to that. Frankly, Trump has said if you don't pay your part, then what's the point? But you know, this is one of the things. All right, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm a fan of Trump, okay? But I am going to say this: when it's become so blatantly obvious that the establishment hates him, if the establishment hates Trump, then you know what? I like him.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good way of putting it when you look at it, because at this point we have an establishment in Washington that is so out of touch with what the American people want and is so determined to antagonize and isolate and do everything they can to hurt Russia. So anything that might hurt that establishment has a strong argument in its favor.
Yeah, you know, along those lines, Putin kind of made a bit of a dig in his speech last night, saying that the Russian election was more democratic than the U.S. election. Is there any truth to that?
Well, yes, because
I would say so.
You know, in this election, every region was included. Every single one. Every part of Russia got to vote. In the United States, our presidential elections, Puerto Rico has no say in who the president of the United States is. Guam, American Samoa, U.S. Virgin Islands. There's millions of Americans who live in these territories. They have absolutely no input. And also, let's add that the voting for the president was direct. Every vote was counted, whereas in the United States, we have this thing called the Electoral College, where you vote for your state, and then your state casts their vote. So it's not a direct direct election. I also was surprised to know that here in Russia, if you've been convicted of a crime and you're doing time in prison, they have a special voting booth in the prison so that you can vote.
Yeah.
If you're in the hospital getting medical treatment, they have a special voting booth in the hospital. We don't have anything close to that in the United States. In many states in the United States, if you commit a crime, you can't vote for the rest of your life. Just forget about voting for the rest of your life. Now, some states are changing that. It's different by state. So this election was far more inclusive. Just basic things.
Yeah.
It was a national holiday and a weekend. Right? You had 3 days to vote, national holiday weekend. The United States, we have one day to vote, unless you want to vote absentee. And that day is a Tuesday, and it's not a national holiday. It's a work day. And in big cities, there's huge lines in the morning before work to vote, huge lines in the evening. Russia wanted participation on the part of its population.
Yeah, it tells you something, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It really does.
It really does.
Just quickly, let me ask you this, Caleb. You know, you live in America, you work in America. I know it's not your first time here in Russia, but flying in from the United States here, getting into the airport, going through immigration, passport control. Have you had any issues? Have you had any problems, any complaints, any eyes wide open moments?
Well, when I went to the planning meeting of the World Festival in November, on the way back, I had my bag searched and got the special treatment from U.S. Customs.
Welcome home.
Yes,
right?
You know, the U.S. officials have made it clear they don't appreciate the work I do at RT, and they don't appreciate the fact that I'm coming here. And I mean, we just heard the State Department saying how much they really appreciate our U.S. observing of this election. And I think it's really great that other Americans have come here to observe. You know, Dan Kovalik, Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney, and others. I think it's really great that we're here observing this election and telling the truth about it, because when you really get down to the details of how the election was carried out, this was very clearly a legitimate and fair election. They want to just kind of cast innuendo and present this story of, oh, Putin's been in office for so long, that can't be democracy. But if you look at the details, this was a very, very clear, fair election, very transparent process. I was in the civic chamber. I saw how every polling station has cameras in it, 2 cameras in it, monitoring it 24 hours a day to make sure there's no foul play. I mean, there's a huge level of transparency here. U.S. officials don't want that version of events out there.
Yeah, they don't want anyone seeing through cameras who's stuffing the ballot boxes and all this kind of stuff. Rachel, any more questions for Caleb?
I just really quickly wanted to ask, because it's not a surprise that we have not had words of congratulation coming out of the White House for President Putin's victory. I do remember when the last presidential election, when Putin was reelected, Trump's staff gave him a note saying, do not congratulate. And then Trump got on the phone and called Putin and congratulated him. I mean, what are your thoughts on the difference here?
Well, again, there are differences within the U.S. establishment when it comes to Russia. Now, there are a lot of folks in the Trump camp that say the USA could get along with Russia and then team up with Russia against China. But anyone who knows anything about economics knows that's not going to happen. Russia and China are closer than ever in terms of economics right now. It's a relationship based on trade. You know, during the Cold War, it was a political difference and the Sino-Soviet split and Henry Kissinger. We can talk about that in history. But right now, Russia and China are economically closer together than ever. And that bond has been solidified by U.S. sanctions on both countries, right? You cut off both countries, they're going to trade more and more with each other. So there are differences within the U.S. establishment about how to deal with Russia. Some of it could just be basic. I think, you know, China is an industrial manufacturing hub. So the manufacturers in the USA see China as more of a rival, whereas Russia is an energy giant, oil and gas. So I think maybe the big oil companies and the natural gas companies see Russia more as a competitor and more of a threat. So it's just a question of who's paying the piper, which sections of the establishment are having the upper hand. But at the end of the day, I mean, there is a faction in the Pentagon, and you have the neocons and others, that they just want U.S. dominance, period. They don't care if it's Russia, China, Venezuela, Iran, North Korea. They don't want any country around the world that'll challenge them. And the BRICS, the rising new economy coming out of the East and coming out of all these different countries that are trading with each other and kind of saying no to the sanctions regime and international finance. This is the future, and it's a future that I think U.S. leaders need to just kind of come to terms with. There's a new economy rising, and we'd be better off trading with it.
I think they're terrified, mate. I mean, just quickly, China is the factory of the world. Russian energy is fueling the Chinese factories, basically, all right? So, you know, we see they're so intertwined now, but you talk about the multipolar world and the global south and how it really is. You know, I mean, look, already the BRICS group already represents more in global GDP than the G7. And yet there are now 20 or 30 more countries that want to join the BRICS. So forget it, G7. You're done. You're done and dusted, mate. It's a whole new multipolar world. And good luck jumping on the train that's already left the station. Caleb Maupin is our senior U.S. correspondent, always up and down the eastern seaboard. It's so good to have you here, back at the mothership in Moscow. Caleb Maupin, do stick around. We'll speak to you soon, all right?
Sounds good.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that was my response to the Russian elections. So that told you basically everything you needed to know. But there we go. And Left is Best said, when I said folks, I meant neolibs. Yeah, well, that was my answer. Penny says, French farmers are revolting because Mercosur agreement favors cheap Ukrainian grain and South American imports while raising French standards. No future for young farmers. Macron should learn from Traore. The farmers of Europe are getting royally screwed, and it is ongoing, and it is kind of scary. It's related to these degrowth policies. They are trying to reduce global crop output, which is, why would you do that when people are hungry in this world? It makes no sense. But the Biden administration has been determined, and BlackRock is also determined, they want less food to be produced. Because they think that's a way to deal with the problem of overproduction and the glut. I mean, it's Malthusian and it's evil, but driving down the world food supply, that is something Biden is committed to. That's something that the World Economic Forum and the, BlackRock, and it makes absolutely no sense, but that is something they are committed to. And they are trying to prevent farmers from growing food. And the excuse is global warming, and it's nuts. Russia has having a farming boom, and Traore is enabling all kinds of people to become farmers. Penny wrote about that in this great book, Africa's Flame. Enabling people to become farmers and open their own farms seems to be something socialist countries are doing. Nicaragua pushes that with the Grow Where You Are Planted program. They're pushing that in Russia. Socialists want farming, anti-imperialists want farming, and Wall Street and the Pentagon and the London Stock Exchange, they want to reduce the global food supply. It's completely crazy, but it is what it is. I mean, part of it is they want to secure the American agribusiness, having its dominance, right? Is that the USA produces a lot of the food. That's why high fructose corn syrup is in everything, because we have corn here. And to some degree or other, they just want France to just completely go out of business. They don't want there to be French farmers. They just want there to be farmers, in American, products. After the fall of the Soviet Union, that was part of how Russia was economically devastated, is that the collective farms of Russia were just basically shut down. They were just completely shut down. And yes, Trump's quantum leap speech was tremendous, by the way. It really did show brilliant economic policies. I wish he would revive that, or at least remember some of what he said in his quantum leap speech. It was really, really good. That was the best thing that Trump did between office terms. He did this quantum leap speech about, rebuilding cities in America and stuff. It was really amazing. Building new cities in the heartland. China and Russia versus the U.S. in Africa. I heard Wagner committing war crimes in Mali and Sudan, and I heard of Chinese firms employing child labor in the Congo. Well, there's two things there. In Mali, the UN troops were in Mali, and they did an awful job. They were actually helping the terrorists. And so Wagner Group was brought in to actually get the job done and actually defeat the terrorists. And they're doing a great job. A friend of mine from Mali has actually talked about this, and he's not somebody who's, would be a communist or a Russia sympathizer. He's just from Mali. He's a guy I know. And he talks about how great, the things have gotten. I mean, the Wagner Group and the new government and the military government in Mali is doing a great job. Is it possible that an atrocity happened here or there? Sure. And that's wrong. And I oppose such a thing. But compared to the corruption and the awful behavior of the UN troops, they're doing a great job. and they're fighting the terrorists. And yeah, Mali is much better off in alliance with Russia and with Wagner there than with the UN. No question about it. As far as the Congo, that's African companies, right? There's a lot of Chinese investment, but China is doing business with domestic African companies, and those domestic African companies might have labor practices in a very impoverished country, the Congo, which is a very, very impoverished country. There may be African companies that are hired that do things that are considered acceptable in the Congo that are not, ethical by our Western standards, and that's a problem. But you can't blame China for that, right? Child labor is a horrendous thing in the developing world. And China is helping countries to develop. And when countries trade with China, they develop. When countries trade with America, they undevelop. So, the IMF and the World Bank impoverishes countries, and China helps industrialize, and countries become more prosperous, and it's win-win cooperation. So China's relationship will lead to countries getting out of this thing, out of that kind of situation. Whereas U.S. cooperation and, Wall Street will do the opposite. I'm starting to get tired, but that's okay. We got a few more Rumble rants. Why is it becoming more prominent than pro-Stalin content? Debunk these points in this pro-Hitler reel. I can't put a pro-Hitler reel on here, and I can't put Instagram on here. First of all, I don't have access to Instagram. I'm definitely not going to put a pro-Hitler reel on. Unfortunately, in America, it has always been more acceptable to defend Hitler than to defend Stalin. And, people say, well, that can't be true, Caleb. Being a Nazi is the worst thing you can be. Yeah, but I'll tell you, I went to school, a little town in Ohio, and we were always taught that communism was just stupid, right? Oh, they want everyone to get paid the same wage. That's dumb. Communism, they're atheists, dictatorship. Communism was just stupid. But Hitler, he was a great speaker, and Germany was so devastated after the war, and the communists were going to take over, and blah, 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 blah. That's a big part of U.S. culture. They're not pro-Hitler. And the school that I went to was not pro-Hitler, but it was like Hitler was an understandable mistake. Communism is an unforgivable idiocy. That's the way standard American education is. It's really disgusting. They make excuses for Nazis, but God forbid anyone be a communist. Exactly. And I know it's a little bit different. If you live in New York City, where the Communist Party was once very strong, and you also have a lot of Jewish folks, the language is not that way. But in a lot of America, that's just kind of how people are taught, right? And then the phrase "Stalin killed more people than Hitler," which is a dumb phrase that has no factual basis, right? That gets used a lot. And it's like, well, they have these big, huge numbers from famines, and they say that's more than the Holocaust. And it's like, that's not reality. A famine is not intentionally killing people. And it was Stalin who built the modern food system of the country. So that's not accurate. But part of it is that there's an edginess to it, right? That, defending Stalin is not really edgy. It's correct, it's rational and all that, but it doesn't trigger the libs. A lot of young men that are on the right, they want to trigger the libs, right? Stalin did not commit genocide, right? As much as that probably pisses people off to hear me say that, he didn't. There were people moved around during the Second World War on the basis of their nationality. There was a famine in the early 1930s that was not just in Ukraine, it was in all of the USSR. Stalin did not commit genocide. Hitler did. Hitler did commit genocide. And defending Hitler, right, is a giant FU to Jews, Gypsies, Russians. It's a giant FU to a whole bunch of people. Defending Stalin is not really that. Maybe it's an FU to Ukrainians, but, other than Ukrainians, other than expats or whatever, right? It's not, there, unfortunately, a lot of these young right-wing men in the manosphere, look, we are critical of all spheres here, right? There's people that think I'm a big Trumper. look, the manosphere sucks. It absolutely sucks, right? And I was thinking about before I did tonight's stream, I said, are people going to think I'm sexist? Are people going to think I hate women? Well, I'm hard on the incels. I am hard on the manosphere. Absolutely sucks. It absolutely sucks. The, pickup artist, Andrew Tate, all that crap, Jordan Peterson. Look, we are critical of all circles here. We're critical of men and women. There's toxic trends among men. There are toxic trends among women. So please, it goes around, and that manosphere is full of guys that just want to offend, And it is true. There are big divisions in the ruling class when it comes to Israel. And there's a big section of the Trump camp that is not on board with Israel. And those divisions over Israel have intensified. You have Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massey, and the kind of faction of MAGA that is anti-Israel is more visible. And so as a surprise, you're going to get, anti-communism is just assumed on the right, but, if you're anti-Israel and you're on the right and you're starting to feel that Israel controls the government, it makes sense to have people starting to talk differently about the Second World War. And it sucks, and I don't agree with it, but it's happening. And I mean, I don't know. Sometime, if you're watching this, and you and I might be able to talk about this over coffee, but one thing I will say that's interesting is that that there's a little bit of hysteria around the Second World War. And it's been a long time since the Second World War. And that hysteria is starting to change, right? And that, when they first made the movie The Producers, right? Mel Brooks made this movie, The Producers. And, it kind of jokes about Nazism. And it was released in the early 60s. And when they first made it, people didn't laugh. It wasn't funny. There were enough people that remembered World War II. They weren't going to buy it. But then, a generation later, they made it a Broadway play, and that it's not as taboo of a subject. And that a lot of things related to World War II have been treated as a taboo subject. Why are there so many Nazi jokes on the internet? Why did TV comedies joke about it? Because it's taboo. The same reason there's sex jokes. The same reason people joke about things that are uncomfortable. And the atrocities that the Nazis committed during the Second World War, the Holocaust, is really, really, really horrendous. And so it's a very uncomfortable thing to talk about. And so as a result, we joke about it because it's uncomfortable. It's becoming less uncomfortable because it's becoming further and further in the past. So the way we interact with that history is going to change. I'm not saying how it's going to change because I don't really know, right? I will say it is absolutely crazy that no one seems to care that, we're funding pro-Nazi people in Ukraine, right? And that just doesn't seem to matter, right? And it's just, all these woke people who love Ukraine, it's just, oh yeah, and they're Nazis. Okay, yeah, moving on. It's like there's loads of Nazis in Ukraine, open Nazi Azov battalion, that kind of people. And, it's just like, oh yeah, these woke people who think everyone's a Nazi, it's just like, all right, whatever, Ukrainian Nazis. That blows my mind. It's also getting old real fast that everyone's a Nazi, right? That's the woke people. Everyone except the Ukrainians are Nazis, right? And it's just, I'm a Nazi, you're a Nazi, 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 Nazi. Everyone's a Nazi. It's getting to the point that people just kind of laugh it off at this point. I mean, it's getting cringe. It's getting stupid, right? And people are really, really tired of that. It's like the little boy who cried wolf. I mean, they say too many times back to the well, too many times back to the same well. I mean, and it's getting stupid. It's really, really, really getting stupid, and people are tired of it. And that has consequences. I will say I am happy that the whole secret Nazi Da Vinci Code thing is done. That was a big part of BreadTube. It's like, I'm going to, there's some video game I don't like. And so I'm going to show images of it and interpret it. And there are so many aspects of Nazism, like anything can be Nazi, right? So first of all, right, they think all Christians are Nazis, right? Because, oh, Christian nation, that means you're anti-Jewish. So if you were saying anything about Christian, you must be a Nazi. But if you were pagan, right, or you were talking about pagan, well, the Nazis also were pagan. Oh, pagan, Nazi. I mean, it was just like anything could be Nazi. At one point, I had someone accusing me of being a Nazi because on my blog, one of the posts on my blog was the 88th post. And I guess, 88 is the 8th letter of the alphabet is H, and 88 is Heil Hitler. It's like a thing that Nazis do. Well, I mean, the reason that my blog post was number 88 was because it came after number 87 and it came before number 89. That's ridiculous. It's so fucking ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous. And, it just got so old, right? There was one person that I heard about, third party, a PSL member, actually. This was maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago. There was a PSL member in I think in Nevada or one of these places, who was obsessed with me being a Nazi, right? He was just on a kick that I was a Nazi. And so somebody super chatted me and asked me about, what do you think about Strasser? What do you think about, the Strasserists? What do you think about, Rosa Luxemburg or something like that? So I gave an answer and just explained what Strasserism was. And, I just said that. That was it. Right. And so somebody clipped it and it was just, video from Caleb. What is Strasserism? And this dumbass screenshotted the video without watching it and sent it to multiple people. See, I told you he was a Nazi. Well, watch the video. I'm clearly not a Nazi. If you watch it, I didn't say anything pro-Nazi. And, the guy just saw I had addressed the question and I must be a Nazi, sent it to a bunch of people. And then multiple people said to him, well, did you actually watch the video, buddy? And he did actually watch the video and realized I was not saying pro-Nazi things. But did he then go, oh, geez, maybe I'm being kind of obsessive and unfair to Caleb? No, of course not. He just continued hating me for other reasons, right? And that's, it's just, that used to be that was a bread tube thing, was everyone I don't like is secretly a Nazi. And it was annoying and stupid. People can be wrong and not be Nazis, right? And it was just like, it was ContraPoints made that really dumb video about how to spot a fascist. And it became this obsessive thing. That's what it meant to be really, really smart. If you were in BreadTube, if you were a leftist internet person, the really, really smart thing to do was to find the secret Nazi. There's all these people that are pretending to not be Nazis and they're Nazis. And it's like, among like the right, right? You could argue that there are people like on the right that are trying to be more mainstream rightists that maybe have white nationalist sympathies. But beyond the right, like there are very, very few people. And that was the BreadTube argument against me, that I'm secretly a Nazi, pretending to be a communist. That was their argument. And one of the things that I loved, right? So they quoted something that I wrote. And I said that, like, I want the people of America of different races to come together and fight for a better future for their children. And they were convinced that that was the 14 words, which is, again, a Nazi slogan, the 14 words, which I don't even remember what they are, but it ends with children. But the point of the 14 words is it's for white people only. And I literally wrote in the sentence, I want people of different races and nationalities to come together to fight for a better world for their children. And they said it was the 14 words. And it's like, and there's videos of them reading out, oh my God. And it's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Right. And it's like the whole point of the 14 words is you're for white people being separate. And I literally said the opposite of that. The only word that overlapped with the 14 words was children. And, And I mean, it's just, it's getting old. And so then as a result of that getting old, people are, indulging the opposite. So it sucks though. I don't know. Right. Anyway, any other Rumble rants? Vietnam State Bank has deactivated over 86 million bank accounts as part of a national effort to verify identity using biometrics. Oh, okay. So they just deactivated them, right? And then people just have to show their identification. They haven't permanently deleted all these bank accounts. That's a good. Thank you for that clarification, Left is Best. That's very helpful. Thank you. That's good. So they haven't deleted these bank accounts. They just deactivated them as part of their rule that you have to show identification. Okay, so the people will get their bank accounts back. So there we go. Okay, all right, very good. All right, and then Checkpoint Charlie sent me. He said, just for fun, some anti-imperialist lyrics. No need to read this if it's awkward. And then he sent me like a very long list of lyrics to a song called "Can I Invade Your Country?" And I'm not going to read out the lyrics, and thank you for giving me the option of not reading it out. But thank you, Checkpoint Charlie. You're here night after night after night. You're a fellow New Yorker, and I do appreciate your ongoing participation. Everyone here is awesome. We have a great little community here. We get on here night after night. We talk politics. We engage. We do good stuff. And I really appreciate all of you. I really, really do. I really, really do. And thank you for being here tonight. I'm trying to be, I don't know, tonight I got a little bit bitter. We talked about Kamala Harris and other things, but night after night we come on here. We have certain recurring ideas. Mark your calendar for January 11th. We're gonna have a great reception in New Jersey. I'm working on the book of the CPI convention. We're gonna put out a coffee table book of the CPI convention, which I will send to various people around the country, and it's like a coffee table book, basically, with a lot of big pictures of the convention, all the speeches transcribed, and it's coming along. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., the final video of the Chicago sessions will premiere on this channel. And then I will then put the Chicago sessions all into one video. And the Chicago sessions will be transcribed in that book. And that book is coming along. I mean, it's almost done. And then there will be a coffee table book, a book of the convention available. And the coffee table book of the convention will give a copy to everyone who attends the event in January for free, right? So you'll get to take home a big coffee table book of the convention. It's going to be big. It's going to be big. I'm designing it to be the same size as We Are City Builders. Like, it'll be bigger than most of our books, and it'll be thick because it's got a lot of pages. It's got every speech transcribed. It's got a lot of different stuff. I'm putting a lot of articles, putting the interview with Roger Waters in it, putting, Noah's interview with Cynthia McKinney into it, putting all kinds of different stuff. And I'm transcribing the Chicago sessions, all the people who spoke at the Chicago sessions, pictures, all of that. It's going to be a nice book to document the convention that we had. So I hopefully will be finishing that. Yeah, you're in it. Kinkle, you came to the convention, so you are in the coffee table book. Your picture will be in it, and your words will be in it transcribed. So, yeah, I'm hoping to finish that soon. I'm actually having a good time doing it. And that we need more material. Every time we do anything, we should treat it as a historic event. We should, because it is, right. We are making history, and we should have a nice book to show people. Look, we had a convention. This is what we did there. It'll mean a lot to the guest speakers that their speech is transcribed and all of that. So I'm doing, so there we go. All right, folks. Well, listen, Happy New Year. Well, no, it's not Happy New Year, right? This is September. So, we'll wait until January for a Happy New Year, but I am tired and I'm going to say goodnight. But we'll be back, and hopefully tomorrow night, if not tomorrow night, soon after that. We're always doing great stuff here. So I'm going to put on the mantra reel and we'll be done.
New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists,
And the people of all countries must get prepared. Revolution is the main trend in the world today.